hereby call the meeting to order pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and as amended as of March 28, 2025. This meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting/hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. This meeting will be recorded by the local scene, formerly known as pac-tv. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by watching Duxbury Government Access Channels Verizon 39 or Comcast 9. Viewers can visit thelocalscene.media/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube. I've called this meeting to order. We will delay the Pledge of Allegiance until after the executive session. We do have a 6 o'clock executive session for collective bargaining to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. We have Attorney Russ Dupree and Jeannie Horn, our HR director, and I will take a motion.
I move we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining, since an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating and bargaining position of the town. If the chair so declares in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapters 38, Section 21, and that the board will adjourn and reconvene in open session on or about 7 p.m. immediately after completion of this executive session.
Great. And may I have that section? I need to read. I don't have a copy handy. Thank you. All right. Oh, I think your mic might be off too. As chair, I declare the necessity of an executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for a contract negotiation. As to do so, an open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining, strategizing, and negotiating position. May we have a second?
Second.
And it requires a roll call. Cindy is online. We'd like to start with Cindy.
Cindy, aye.
Fernando, aye.
Michael, aye.
Brian, aye. We are in executive session.
Yeah.
Executive session. We've now moved on to our open session. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next is open forum. This is the part of the agenda where we can raise issues that aren't on the agenda, but we can't speak to them. I'll start first with my colleagues on the board. Anything for executive session? We have Cindy online tonight, so we do have a full board. Anything up here? Cindy, okay? Yes, go right ahead.
You're muted.
Oh,
All muted.
go right ahead, Cindy.
No, Cindy's muted.
Oh, Cindy's muted too. There we go.
I'm sorry, no, I don't have.
Okay, great. I have a couple of things. First, I'd like to wish Michelle a happy birthday. You get to spend it with us this evening. Happy birthday, Michelle.
Birthday.
Yeah.
There you go. Say good to my eye.
Next is community CPR. The Duxbury Fire Department offers a 2-hour free community CPR class every month for town residents. Participants learn how to perform hands-only CPR, how to use an automatic external defibrillator, how to administer Narcan and EpiPens, as well as choking first aid. It's not a formal certification, but the skills can help save a life, and I was very happy to participate this past Wednesday. And my thanks to the two instructors who are incredibly knowledgeable and engaging. That was firefighter paramedics Matt Breyer and Tom Brandt. They did great work. I'd like to share that interested residents can sign up on the department's website. It's duxburyfire.org. It's limited to 20 seats per session, and the next one is on May 21st. The program won't run over the summer, but it'll be back in the fall. I appreciate Chief Reardon's leadership on the program, and to our town manager and finance director, who were able to fully fund this program through the opioid settlement. Thank you both for making that happen. Thanks also to Karen Keneally, who manages the program, and for other members of the fire department who also present the class. Two other things. Next is the Duxbury Art Complex. The Duxbury Art Complex Executive Director Peter Mello invited members of the Select Board to tour during Creative Sector Advocacy Week last week. I was pleased to make a visit and learned about the ideas that Peter and his colleague have about upcoming program to draw visitors from across the region. His updates include extending hours of operation, organizing community events this summer, offering live classical music performances in the gallery, and an Art Week for Kids pilot program in August for children ages 7 to 11. They also are planning to develop a paid internship program for DHS students interested in pursuing a career in the creative sector. My thanks to Peter for an enjoyable visit, and watch out for that scholarship. Finally, MBTA communities. First, under the lawsuit, you may recall that Duxbury and other communities have filed a lawsuit against the Commonwealth on the grounds that the MBTA communities law constitutes an unfunded mandate. We've asked the court to issue an order excusing Duxbury from having to comply. The reason I'm bringing this up is the Superior Court has scheduled a hearing for Duxbury's request for this Friday, May 9th. The case will be heard at the Taunton Superior Court, and as that's where the judge will be sitting for the day. I will note that it's unusual for a judge to issue a ruling on an injunction the same day as the hearing, so it's unlikely that we'll know the outcome right away. And secondly, the MBTA Communities Working Group held a public forum this past Tuesday. We had some technical challenges with the projector, so in the interest of sharing the presentation more broadly as possible, the working group, as you saw on the agenda, will be presenting to us tonight, right after the hazard mitigation plan. Does anybody from the public have anything for open forum? All right, let's dive right in. The first item on our agenda is the presentation regarding the hazard mitigation plan presented by Martin Pillsbury, Director of Environmental Planning with MAPC.
Should I speak?
Mr. Pillsbury, yes, please. That microphone is for the folks at home.
Very good. Thank you for having me tonight to the board. So the town is in the middle of doing a hazard mitigation plan, and I wanted to have an opportunity to let the board and the whole public know about the plan as it's being constructed, because it's not the kind of plan that most people are familiar with. Like, you might know more about your comprehensive plan, your master plan, and things that are a little bit more common. And maybe can you advance the slides for me? Thank you very much. So, yeah, and that's just a chapter head to show you an example. Basically, Why is the town doing this plan? This is actually part of a national program that was established by FEMA in the year 2000, 25 years ago, under what was then a new law, the Disaster Mitigation Act. And what was new at that time, FEMA had always been charged with coming in after a disaster happened, helping with recovery and all of that kind of thing, cleanup and recovery. This law said, let's see what we can do before the disaster strikes in communities and states to make them the more resilient so that when the events happen, the natural events happen, perhaps we'll have less damage and less loss of life. I call it the getting out of harm's way approach. And that's kind of what was, looks at what preventative actions can be taken. The way it was set up under FEMA, each state implements the program. So in our state, the Mass Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, is the agency that's running the program. The town has a plan in place already. It was done back in 2019. Our agency, MAPC, helped the town put that one together. And the way it's set up, that these plans need to be renewed every so many years. FEMA suggests every 5 years because conditions change, hazards change, the methods used to deal with these hazards change, the technology changes, so every 5 years or so. So the town is in the middle of doing an update to the plan that they last put together in 2019. And the other thing I'll mention is that it's not a mandate to have one of these plans. There's no penalty or fine if you don't have one. But FEMA strongly encourages every town and city in the whole country and every state at the state level to have a plan. And we do have a really good state level plan called the Mass Resilience Plan. And so there's a carrot, it's not so much a stick, but a carrot. And that is if a town or city has an approved plan, they will be eligible to apply for funding for various categories of FEMA grants. I have to say tonight, I have some not so good news. One of those FEMA grants that has always been held out as a carrot has been subject to the recent cuts. That's the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, BRIC BRIC grant, which is a very substantial grant. We had over several $100 million worth of this grant in Massachusetts in the last year. So that grant has gone away for now, and at least I know there's going to be appeals and some of these things might come back, but for the moment that's off the table. But we still think that it's a good idea to do this kind of plan because it's an opportunity for the community to assess your vulnerabilities, to look at what actions you can take, and whether or not there's a federal grant at the end of that rainbow, there's other funding sources you could use to do some of this, including state grants through the MVP program and others. So we'll talk a little about that. So that's the context, like why the town is doing it, what's the general idea of it. When we say hazard mitigation, it's not exactly a household word that falls off the tongue easily. So what is it? What do we mean by that? Well, in this case, we're mitigating natural hazards in these plans. And as you see on, could you go to the next slide, please? What we're doing is looking at all categories of natural hazards, what you see on the right side of this slide here. Flooding, wind event, and flooding, by the way, both coastal and inland or riverine flooding. High wind events, whether they're from thunderstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, or any kind of event, winter storms, geologic hazards, so things that are not really all that common or even all that likely, but if there's some chance that there could be an impact, it's included in the plan. Wildfires, which is something now in the last year or two with the droughts we've had, has become more on the top of mind, even in this part of the country. And extreme temperatures, most likely extreme heat, but could be extreme cold. And drought. And again, drought is something that we've experienced a lot more of recently, so it's a higher priority than it may have been a few years ago. The box at the top left here is the basic take-home sort of elevator ride description of what do we mean by hazard mitigation. Reducing impacts of natural hazards through strategies, including projects, programs, and policies. And we'll go into, in a few slides later, some of the specifics of what that means. The basic philosophy or the basic approach to putting together hazard mitigation is summed up in the lower left. We ask these two questions when we start this kind of planning. What preventative actions are already being taken now in the community? And as an aside, you've been living with these hazards for years, all of our towns, so it's not as if you aren't doing anything. So we take stock of what you're doing now, and then that gives us the ability to say, where are the gaps? Or where are the methods that are there, but that could be updated or refreshed? And that leads to the second question, what additional actions can be taken in the future to increase the resilience of the community? So that's the goal of these plans. Could you go on, please? And what FEMA is trying to do in this program is to break or at least reduce this cycle of disaster rebuild, which we've seen in many places. If you look at the repetitive loss statistics in many communities, including some along the coast here, that's kind of one of the things we're trying to intervene with the process. Let's go next, please. So when we say hazard mitigation, it's not one method or one thing. It's kind of an umbrella term, and we've broken it down into sort of 6 different buckets or categories of types of activities that are very different from each other, but all lead to making a community more resilient. The first is the prevention, and that's what I call staying out of harm's way. Being aware of where the hazard areas are, where the floodplains, where the areas subject to wildfires, et cetera, and thinking about through your building regulations and zoning and that sort of thing, where are you actually putting development or redevelopment, and or if it's even if it's put in an area that may be hazardous, is it then built in a way that is more resistant to whatever those hazards are? The second category is property protection, recognizing that in older communities like this, that goes back to the founding of the country, in the 1600s, we have a lot of development that got put in place in areas we now know to be hazards and floodplains. They weren't mapped back in the colonial eras. People built near them, they built mills, they wanted to be by the water, they had ports like this town, and we now know that put a lot of the development in harm's way. So what can we do to make that development coexist with what are now known as by protecting the property? That can include things like building elevations, even just elevating the utilities within buildings and some of the windproofing that you see on buildings and that sort of thing. Public education and outreach is actually an important part of this. Even though that's not actually a project on the ground, it's actually very important for the public to be aware of what the hazards are, because actual homeowners, small business owners, they're responsible for their own properties. The town can do a lot for your own properties, but you can't necessarily do that for everybody. So everyone needs to be aware of what the hazards are and what they can be doing to be more resilient. Protecting natural resources, and this is the one that I call, letting Mother Nature do some of the work for us, protecting our marshes and our wetlands as buffers for storms, keeping the floodplains naturally in good conditions because they can do the job of storing some of that flood water, et cetera. Then we get to structural projects, kind of infrastructure things. Culverts, dams, seawalls. And so in cases where we have a significant amount of development in the areas that we know are already hazardous, these are the kind of infrastructure projects that are necessary if we are going to coexist with these hazards. Many of these have been put in place in the past decades, and many of them are decades old and need to at least be upgraded, and some places we need new. So this is where some of the higher price ticket items are under development, and actually this is a category where those FEMA grants can really help, and some of the state grants. So we'll talk about the grants a little bit later. Finally, emergency services protection. So this is not an emergency response plan. The town actually has a really good plan for that called the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, or CEMP. But in this plan, we're thinking about what are the facilities that the community relies on to be able to provide that utility. Your DPW yard, your fire department, your police department, communications towers. Are they safe? The last thing you want to happen is all of that goes out. So now you can't actually help anyone else in town. So thinking about prioritizing those. And would you move to the next slide, please? Whoops, I think we jumped. Yeah. So after that one, yeah. So the last thing I'll mention is when these plans started out 25 years ago, climate change wasn't really at the top of a lot of the language. What we've seen as recent years, that as we're looking at floods, we're looking at tornadoes, we're looking at wildfires, we're looking at high temperatures. These are all the very same things that we're concerned about becoming worse in the future. And so we're now integrating the thought about not only looking back at what's the record of floods we've already had, what's the record of different hazards, but also how much different and or potentially worse might some of these hazards be in the future, and how can we build that into the planning. So go ahead, please. And so we'll talk a little bit about the planning process for putting together this plan. And go ahead, next slide. So start with, we have a local hazard mitigation team, and really kudos to this team. It's just they're doing an amazing job. You see on the right side of the slide, virtually every department or board or commission in the town is on this team. And I have to say really kudos to Duxbury, because we do these plans in a number of towns. And this list is about half that long in most towns. And they still do a good job, but there's 6 or 7 town members. So when we have a meeting in here, in this room, we fill the room up with the team. And they're all so knowledgeable, and they bring so much information. And that's what it's all about. This team is going to bring the specific local knowledge into the format of the plan. We're here just to actually kind of make sure it all fits into the format that FEMA wants to see it in. but the content that's very specific to the town comes from the team. So we set a process up where this team is meeting 4 times over approximately a year, about 4 quarterly meetings. We've actually had 2 of those meetings, so we're really midstream right now. This is why we wanted to take this moment while we're midstream to let people know about the plan. On the left side, you see the major role the team plays. They basically help us to identify lots of local sites, the critical facilities, where are there local areas of hazard and flooding, review the goals, make sure it makes sense for this town, and then look at what the mitigation actions are in the plan and help us approve ones that will be logical and useful for this particular town. Go on, please. So the process to put the plan together, this is just sort of a timeline process, just showing that we've had a couple of the first 2 team meetings here already. We are at the first public meeting. We'll have, after this, we'll move on to have a 3rd team meeting and a 4th, which is where we'll be looking at the mitigation measures that are the heart of the plan, the recommendations in the plan for actions for future mitigation. Once we've prepared a draft plan, which will be like next fall, we'll be back with a 2nd public meeting at that point with a draft plan available for the public to see the actual plan. We'll post it on the town's website. We'll make it available. I'll come and give a brief summary of the plan itself, and we'll have a few weeks when people can read it, comment on it before we close the book on it and finalize it. So that's where we are. We're really right in the middle of the process. Go on. And let's talk a little bit about some of the hazards that the plan and the vulnerabilities that the plan is addressing. So one thing is everything that we get information on locally, we map. So we have inventories that the local team helps us build. This is an inventory of some of the local hazard areas, areas that are known to have flooding and drainage area problems or coastal flooding issues. And also there are a number of potential wildfire or brush fire sites. All of those, I know you can't see it at this scale, but when you get the map, you can see this. And this will be on GIS, which could then be given to the town also as GIS files that you can integrate with your other plans. Go ahead. The other thing that we look at is critical facilities. So critical facilities, there's actually a list of about 55 of them in the town. And that term includes kind of 2 different buckets of categories of sites. The sites of great utility to the town and the key town features that you care about, starting with town hall, fire and police, and then infrastructure like wells and water pumps, your DPW, et cetera, et cetera. You see that these are just examples. It's actually 55 on the whole list. But then on the other side of the coin, we have sites that may require assistance. So that's where you'll see things like schools, council on aging, housing that may have elderly or nursing homes, group homes, a special population. So we're thinking about what are the facilities that are important to give service and what are the facilities that may require service. They're all considered critical for those 2 different reasons, and they're all in the list and they're all mapped. Go ahead, then, please. As I mentioned, there's a number of different hazards the plan looks at besides flooding. Flooding is kind of like the primary one that's most common, but we're looking at things like extreme heat, at earthquakes, at drought, as you see from these graphics here, wildfires, and just extreme precipitation events. They'll all be included in the plan. And this is New England. We can't leave this topic without mentioning our favorite, nor'easters. This is just a list of some of the most outstanding ones over the last decade or so, although we probably get a few of them almost every year. Now, they don't all cause a lot of damage, but some of the more outstanding ones really do, and that's part of the plan. Okay. So next steps to complete the plan. Go ahead. So what we'll be doing with the team is reviewing the mitigation recommendations from, actually, it's the 2019.
A long time ago.
Sorry about that. This is a really long update. We've waited a little too long to update this plan. Sorry about that. So this is just a brief list, and they're described in more detail in the existing 2019 plan, of what the recommendations for mitigation actions are. And we'll be looking over this list at our next team meeting and saying, which of these has the town actually already implemented? There'll be a few that probably you have. Which of them are long-term and maybe you've started the steps and you're in mid-process still, and which of them have you not yet started? And I guarantee you, there's going to be some that fall into all categories, because you just can't do all of these in just a few years. The nature of these plans is why they are, they are long-term. They get reviewed every 5 years. It's a chance to check in and see where you are, and to ask yourself, is this still an important measure from our last plan? Even if we didn't do it yet, we want to keep it and move it and continue to have it as a goal. Or have conditions change and we want to take some things out from next one. So that'll be up to the team to be able to, we don't make these decisions, MAPC. We're here to sort of like almost be the scribe and give a little advice, but the team makes the decisions about what content they want the plan to have in it. So the next steps is to hold our next 2 team meetings. We'll have the 3rd meeting this summer. We'll have early fall, probably the 4th meeting. And then later in the fall, we'll be ready to have the 2nd public meeting and review of the draft plan, and then finalize that plan toward the very end of the year. That's when we'll be all done with the process. So those are our next steps. And if you put one more slide up, it's my contact information. We have set aside a dedicated email inbox for anyone who has questions, Duxbury Resilience at mapc.org. And feel free to send any questions to me on this. And when we have the plan out for review a little bit later, people will be able to send comments to this email box as well. And that's the recap.
Thank you, Martin. Terrific presentation. Questions, comments from the board?
Actually, I thought it was, for me, very thorough. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Mike?
We've had other studies over the years. The Woodhull Group did a big one probably a decade ago that we've been working off of in recent years. Was that considered incorporated into this plan
Yes,
at all?
those kind of more technical plans that you've done, we'll take a look at them and we'll see what the status of them are and pull forward whatever is useful still today or for the next 5 years out of those earlier reports, and say, this actually, and many of them still are, they may need to be refreshed a little bit, but they were identified for a reason back then a few years ago as, and probably those reasons still exist in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, the town hasn't changed,
Right.
so to speak, and a lot of the ideas that are on there
Right.
were in that
Yes,
report. Raising roads.
This plan is an overview of everything, so we sort of scarf up everything we can from existing plans and say what's ever relevant to this topic, and make sure we're not missing anything that, reinvent any wheel that's already been done.
Thank you.
Cindy, did I see your hand?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just had a question about the availability for funding. And is it a sort of a hard and fast 5 years? Or the fact that we're working on a new one, if we were to have some sort of disaster, let's say in the fall, would we still be eligible for?
Okay, so I think from your question, I'm going to clarify. The funding that is depending on the plan is hazard mitigation planning funding and project funding. But when there is an actual hazard disaster occurred and there is money that comes in as response, that's not dependent on a plan. It's the funding to do proactive projects to make the town more resilient, like change culverts, fix up seawalls, et cetera, generators. But when there's damages and from an actual event and there's FEMA money available to make people whole from those damages and the town whole from those damages, that's not affected by the plan, what status of your plan has. That's not the plan is not a prerequisite for those funds.
Okay, so the proactive funding, is that something that we are now not eligible for because it's been over 5 years?
Actually, it's only been, your plan only expired last year in 2024, so you're not eligible for it right now, but it hasn't been that long, and you'll be back in the game by the end of this year, so yeah. And there's no immediate, given unfortunately the BRIC funding cuts, there's no immediate grant that is kind of like subject to this plan at this moment right now anyway, so that's, but for future years, with some hope that this something like BRIC or some, a successor grant might come back later, that's probably, you'll be in good shape for that. Right.
Thank you.
Amy, do you have anything?
No, I'm good. It was a good presentation. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. You mentioned FEMA a number of times, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Do we also include any work with MEMA, the state agency that handles
Well,
similar
actually,
things?
MEMA is the agency that, through which all the grants flow.
Okay.
So basically, if you were to get a grant, a FEMA grant. It actually would come to you from MEMA with a legal contract from MEMA. So they are authorized to implement these FEMA programs within Massachusetts.
Okay, are there any state-specific grants? You talked about the federal grants.
Yes, there are. And so probably the most significant one for this topic is called the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, MVP. At least they came up with a nice acronym. The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant has an action grant program that people can apply every year for actual projects on the ground that are based on climate resilience. So some of the same things that we talk about here. And you may have a project that you might have gone to FEMA for, but if FEMA is not there, the MVP state level grant might be a reasonable substitute. Probably not for the really huge ticket items. You know, the 10 and 20 million plus, because the BRIC project program can fund those. But programs in the hundreds of thousands to a few million are something that MVP can fund.
Thank you. And then one thing that caught my eye through this, and I appreciate how thorough, to Fernando's point, how thorough this review is. We think generally in our community of coastal resilience,
Right.
and water-related hazards, but certainly we have lots of woodland in town. We're great stewards of open space, and we've collected quite a few acres over the years. And one thing that's popped up over the last few years that's affected other communities, and I know it's out of sight, out of mind here in Duxbury to a certain extent, but wildfire risk is a real risk.
That is part of the
Yeah.
plan, and in fact, the fire chief has identified, and it's on the map, at least a dozen sites that are potentially subject to that, given the vegetated condition of those sites. And we already have a record from the fire chief of the responses the department has made for outdoor fires over the last 5 years to get a sense of what you've actually experienced. So, and there will be some mitigation measures in the plan that deal with wildfire for sure. And it really has become more elevated in the last couple of years. You know, we not just Duxbury, but throughout Eastern Mass and the region, the droughts of the last few years have driven many more wildfires. I think last year they said we had 6,000 acres burned in Massachusetts, which is way more than normal, whatever normal is. There were a few years there in the teens that people didn't even think about this because it was hardly ever happening. When we do a plan like this, we'd have a hard time getting people to even focus on it. All of a sudden, when it happens, oh yeah, we do get these fires. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. Rainey, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there anything from the town administration perspective you'd like to add to the
No, because
presentation?
we're party to it, and I think Martin's doing a terrific job, and I very much appreciate it.
Okay. Excellent. We don't have anything to vote on this, right?
No, we're not asking for any action, just
Not for a
public
while.
information tonight.
Yes, terrific. Thank you very much. Anything from the public? Any questions? All right. Thanks,
Thank you
Martin.
very much,
Terrific.
and my email's available for follow-up questions.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks for
you
the
very
hard
much.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay, next we have MBTA outreach presentation and bylaw transmittal from the planning board to the select board. The select board is being asked to vote on referring the proposed bylaw to the planning board for the review and public hearing. There will also be a presentation of the public presentation, the thing I had mentioned during open forum. This will be presented by MBTA Communities Working Group Steve Gant, Tag Carpenter, Allison Shane. And I see we also have member Alicia Babcock here, and I think that's it, right? I haven't left anybody out? Okay, great.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Go right ahead.
Functionally, we send this to the planning board to review and vote on. Will it come back to us after it's been reviewed, edited, or something like that after?
No, I don't think so. This is just it's a zoning bylaw that goes to the planning board public hearing, and that's a necessary step before it goes to town meeting.
They make changes, are we going to know about it? That's what I'm...
No, not as a board, but if you have comments, questions, please bring them up now. Tag, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Tag Carpenter, Summer Street. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here today, of course, to, as you said, refer the bylaw that was approved by the planning board on Monday for you to then forward it back so that the planning board can hold a public hearing on May 12th. So this is a formality, but we did want to take this opportunity to provide you with the briefing that we prepared for a series of public forums, which the dates will be posted later. They're in May and June, and give you, of course, the opportunity to ask any questions directly of us as a result. So we'll just jump right into this. And so the agenda for this presentation is fairly brief. There's 3 main sections. First of all, we give some background on the law. What is it? How does it affect us? And what is a working group? and how we've responded to the mandate in the legislation and the regulation. We cover a little bit of the feedback from the last proposition at the November 24th town meeting, talk about the lawsuits, as Brian mentioned, and the current proposition, which is really the main focus, of course, for our June town meeting. And then finally, we're going to wrap up by giving you more information about the specifics of the strategy and then talk about the open forum sessions that we'll be holding. So next slide, please. So what is it? I mean, I think you guys all know that we've had a lot of background on this. It was passed in 2021. 177 communities in eastern Massachusetts were identified as subject to the law. It is intended to increase the supply of reasonably priced homes, and as stated in MGL, within a half mile of a C station, a district of reasonable size for multifamily by right with 15 units per acre. That is the law. Through the actions of the Housing and Livable Communities Office, they expanded the definition to go beyond the half a mile and allow all of the communities that are affected to choose the locations for this expanded multifamily development right zone of a reasonable size. It was signed into law in the later part of the session of 2021, I understand unanimously by the legislature, and then they went into the regulatory process in 2022, and that's when we became aware that it impacts us.
Can we ask questions?
Sure, yeah, why not?
Yeah, so basically, just remind me, you said any community within half a mile of an MBTA?
The law itself referred to creating a right to multifamily development within a half a mile of a T station.
But
the end of the sentence has comma, if applicable, and that opened it up for interpretation by the executive branch. And then
Yeah,
the
because
interpretation.
I presume it's a Kingston station at Kingston, right?
Yes, and that's
But
why.
that's more than, how did they measure half a mile?
Right, it's certainly
where?
not within a half a mile. And that was my hope initially as well, that we're off the hook, right? We're not within a half mile. But it has to do with the fact that they're focusing on the MBTA service area. And according to a service area model, any town that is adjacent to a town with a transit station, a commuter rail node, a bus station, is adjacent to public transit. And so adjacency is the state's gift to us so that we can enjoy the extended rights of multifamily.
That word adjacent, you can drive a bus through it, in other words, what you're trying to say, right?
Well, I'm not going to
Literally.
engage in criticism at
Okay,
this
right,
point.
then fair enough.
We're
Thank
here
you.
to present information. So the community, MBTA Communities Working Group is a member of seven members. Your board, of course, appointed the members initially in 2024, and then we were reappointed. 5 members continued in 2025. And we are meeting weekly on Thursdays. Every meeting is open to the public. We welcome public participation. We've had some of the residents that were involved last time attending, and we really appreciate that, and others who have an interest in the law and want to understand the proposition that's going to be put before them at town meeting in June. So Thursday nights at 6 in the Senior Center. All right, I think that's it for me, and I'd like to introduce Allison.
Thank you. Allison Shane, South Station Street. So there's 3 main impacts to Duxbury. Number 1 is the law requires Duxbury to identify at least 50 acres in town where property owners would have the right to build multifamily housing. Impact 2, Duxbury is required to pass a zoning plan through town meeting by mid-July to avoid legal consequences. Our special town meeting is scheduled for June 16th, 2025 in the PAC starting at 7 p.m. And the third impact is by passing a zoning plan, Duxbury is not required to build or pay for any housing. The town only needs to make it legal for property owners in the proposed districts to build multifamily housing if they choose to do so.
Did you say, so this does not require Duxbury to do any building? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, so just in case anyone didn't hear that, we got a question from the audience that Duxbury is not required to build anything or pay for housing, and that is correct.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions about this slide? All right, next slide, please. So we held a special town meeting in fall of 2024 in November. The town rejected that plan that would have zoned Bonji's, the turkey farm, for multifamily housing, and it would have accommodated home building in the short term. It was clear residents do not want to rezone any properties where multifamily homes could be built in the immediate future, and also residents expressed interest in whether it was possible to avoid complying with the law. Next slide. However, after the town meeting in January of 2025, the Supreme Judicial Court, or SJC, ruled in the Milton case that the MBTA Communities Act is constitutional, and the AG has the authority to enforce it. So in other words, it is the law. Duxbury is still seeking exemption from compliance in a lawsuit arguing that the law is an unfunded mandate. Success of this lawsuit is uncertain based on precedent, and if the lawsuit succeeds, the state can choose to fund the law, and the law would still be in place and enforceable. With that, I'll pass it on to Steve. Or Tag?
Yep.
One of those.
Thanks, Allison. So I'd like to now get into it a little bit more in terms of the proposition. The benefits of the town choosing to vote in favor of the proposition on June 16th include retaining eligibility for at least 17 state grant funding programs. This has nothing to do with federal money. This is all state grants. The grants in the state level provide things like storm protection, infrastructure upgrades, including a sidewalk project we're entertaining now. And people have asked, what do we stand to lose in actual dollar terms? That question is not simple to answer because grant applications come up all the time. And so even if we have a number today, that number can easily change in the future as we pursue additional grant funding. But we know that in 2023 and 2024, Duxbury did receive almost $2 million, or more than $2 million in grants that are classified as ineligible for communities which are non-compliant with the MBTA Communities Act. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that the legislature and the executive have continued to use this metric of compliance with MBTA communities, or Chapter 3A, as a criteria for evaluating eligibility for grants. So the list at this point stands at 17. I fully anticipate that would go up.
Tag?
Yeah.
So this is going to come up, and I think we need to lock it down a little bit more firm for town meeting. So the SJC case said that 3A is constitutional.
Yeah.
It specified, 3 or 4 grants
4 initially, the legislature.
that are constitutional, so when you're talking about 17 state grant funding, are you talking about in the emergency regulations, additional grants that we're no longer eligible for from the emergency regulations that were set forth after the SJC also said that the regulations that they had set forth were invalid?
Mm-hmm. The guidance was ruled invalid because the Administrative Procedures Act wasn't followed.
Correct.
And then the guidance was re-released as emergency regulation.
Right.
Which, as I understand it, is now in force, if I believe.
No, the emergency is in force.
Yeah.
Are these 17 grant funding programs that we could potentially be ineligible for, is that in these emergency regulations?
I don't have a firm answer for that, so I apologize. It's my understanding that there are 2 mechanisms whereby grant eligibility can be modified.
Right.
One is through the legislature, and I have seen, proposals, I don't know if any of them have passed, through the legislature to add this criteria, so that may have been done. Mm-hmm. And also, of course, through the regulatory process. And
I only say this because people are going to ask it, but it's important because we are in this kind of they haven't passed regulations.
Yeah.
And will they? Likely, yes. But I think people are going to want to know now which ones of these $2 million grants are in these emergency regs
Yep.
that were essentially a copy of the guidelines, and what's our liability?
Yep.
Is really,
That's an
and that's
excellent
going to come
question.
back, through Mary's off, which of these grants are we talking about? But at the end of the day, we've been given guidance, at town meeting, and that grants are discretionary. And certainly, we could be rejected for certain grants because we're not complying with the law.
Yeah.
But I think people are going to want to know the breakdown.
That's good. We'll see if we can find that out. I
right.
appreciate the question. Yep. As far as where that originates from.
And MVP grants, something that Martin actually just mentioned in the last presentation, is among those.
Is it?
Among the what?
at risk.
Are they
Under the
in
17
in the law or in the regs?
I'm going to pull it up right now because the Attorney General filed an opposition to our request for an injunction. And with that were some affidavits where state officials themselves made reference. So, why don't you keep going? I'll find that in the meantime.
Great, thank you, Brian. So another benefit, if the town should choose to enact the zoning amendment and remain in compliance with the MBTA Communities Law, is that we maintain control within the town over zoning. And this is a kind of a subtle point, so I'm going to go into some detail, but because this is a requirement of law, and you, our governing body, have determined that we wish to remain in compliance with the law, if the town chooses not to accept the proposal at town meeting, unless you change your minds, we're going to be back at this again. We will have to repeat the exercise of identifying zoning districts, identifying zoning language, having public hearings back and forth between the planning board and the select board, and take it to town meeting once again. And speaking strictly for myself, I don't want to do that. I don't think there's any benefit to continuing this drama personally. If we put the law in place, I know that people are aware that the 40B statute that allows higher density multifamily development has been enforced since 1969. And the fact is that it hasn't had to date a tremendous impact in the town of Duxbury, and part of that is due to our bylaws because of the way we jealously guard the integrity of our sole source aquifer. So those regulations help to diminish the impact of 40B on our community. That statute is a state-level statute, and proposals are evaluated by a state commission, whereas if we pass MBTA community zoning, any multifamily development that could be proposed under it would be governed entirely by Duxbury's bylaw. There would be no state agency involved in approving any proposition for development under this. So with that, we'll transition to...
Tag, let me stop you real quick.
Okay.
Can I just come back to a
Yeah,
point
yeah,
about
yes.
funding? So there is an affidavit, these are the materials that the state filed in opposition to our lawsuit, an affidavit of Christopher G., who's the General Counsel of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. It's an affidavit dated April 1st, 2025. Paragraph 4, this is the important part. It doesn't have a list attached. However, it's pretty broad. It is the current policy of the Healy-Driscoll administration that all discretionary state grants, and I'll repeat that, all discretionary state grants to municipalities may be subject to compliance with Section 3A. That's the MBTA community statute.
But this affidavit is from who again?
The General Counsel of the Massachusetts Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And he's representing the policy of the state government, the executive branch.
I guess it's not a huge surprise that that would be his,
Well, he's representing what the governor's position is. And this is an affidavit, a statement made under
Interesting.
penalties of perjury. So I take that as it's written. So to Tag's point earlier, while we don't have a list necessarily, it's consistent with what we've seen anecdotally as the MBTA Communities Working Group, which is the list of grants, which was 4 in the original emergency regulations, continues to grow. So we should just assume going forward that if it's a grant we rely upon, that it's going to be subject, as long as it's discretionary. There are some mandatory grants, Chapter 70 for school, for example. If it's discretionary, the governor is going to look at it through the lens of compliance with 3A. So that, hopefully that answers the question, but Tag, go right ahead.
I've
Oh,
got
I'm
another
sorry.
question, sorry.
Yep.
This, I've been looking through this is just one slide, it says benefits, right? I don't see a slide which talks about the risks of us complying or not complying with what we're trying, right? So we're trying to do paper compliance. All right, there is a risk that when the state receives our bylaw, if we approve it, that they may reject it because it's paper compliance. You're not actually doing anything about it. You're putting so much stuff in it that makes it virtually impossible for anybody to build.
Well,
It's an excellent question. We actually have an answer to that.
Going to come up a little bit later.
All right.
Yeah,
Right, so I
I
think
don't
we
want to
should
do
just-
the whole thing out of order. Let me go through the slides in order, and we'll get into that.
That will come up,
in a
because
couple of minutes.
that was an issue.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yep.
So we talk about benefits, but there's also risk, and we should, to be, what we're trying to do here is inform the voters,
Yes,
right? To make
yeah.
an informed
Well,
choice. And so, yeah, there's a benefit for it, but there's also a risk, and I think we should be able to, we should ensure that we describe that risk so that people are able to make that informed vote. That's all.
Agree. I think that the challenge is, Fernando, in taking that
Yeah.
kind of a binary approach, is that there are benefits and risks to voting yes, and there are benefits and risks to voting no, and they're opposite.
Absolutely.
So here in this briefing, we are choosing to focus on the affirmative and frame it in this way. If we vote positively, these are the benefits, these are the risks. Does that make sense? Because then you cover it all. Instead of saying, well, if you vote no, because that doesn't help us to solve this problem of being in compliance with the law.
I think the point is, as long as we give all of the information
Oh, of
to the
course, yeah.
voters,
Oh.
even including the what ifs.
What ifs.
If this were to pass, what could happen? I know that
Mm-hmm.
this is based on a unlikely to happen, however, it could. So I think that, again,
Sure.
I believe what you're saying is that we owe it to the residents to give them all of the information.
Yeah,
And that's what we're attempting to do,
Got
by
it.
all means.
okay,
Yep.
good.
It's a matter of framing, because if we start having the let's vote no conversation and having the what if discussion, that can literally go on forever. It can go on forever. So we have to focus on a pathway and see what it takes to get down the path. So now let's transition away from the legal issues and the executive imprimatur and talk about the concrete proposal before us for June. As you may recall from last November, there were 2 areas then that were zoned, and it's very similar to what you see before you today. Very similar. The same places in town are being considered for overlay zoning. Again, this is overlay zoning. It doesn't alter the underlying zoning in any way. Because the decision was taken and the direction was given to pursue paper compliance or minimal technical compliance, the way this is done is by placing the overlay district in an area where there is already high-density multifamily development, so that there really isn't much prospect for any additional multifamily development in those locations. And this is what we're presenting with you, to you tonight. So the 2 zones, 2 sub-districts of the overlay district are on the right, the MBTA Communities Overlay District, MCOD. If you look at the general press, you'll see that in general they use the term MCMOD, MICMOD. It's the same thing. It's just a label. We chose MCOD for our zoning this time around. The MCOD Tremont location encompasses the park at Island Creek, apartment buildings, and a fraction of the property of the First Baptist Church on Tremont Street, next to the highway exit. The other location on the left, MCOD Kingstown, is the name that will appear in the zoning map, is the village at Duxbury property, and it is a subset of the village at Duxbury property. It is not the entire property. It is the part of the property which is already developed. So when we look at the details, you'll see that the bounds encompass the existing buildings. So that's the next slide.
Go ahead.
Could I ask a question about the actual mapping? At the previous presentation, when you were picking the, here we are, when you were picking the sites to move forward with, one of the parcels was just slightly short of the required acreage. Did you make the correction with that?
Yes, yeah, the numbers weren't accurate on some of the imagery. That was part of the problem.
Thank
So
you.
we've straightened all of that out. So here you see the 2 sites. They're reversed in orientation from what you saw previously. So the village at Duxbury, MCOD Kingstown on Kingstown Way is here on your right. As I just mentioned, you see the long driveway going to the back and the very large apartment complex there, all interior amenities. It's a really wonderful place. And it is already developed in this configuration with these bounds at about 12 units per acre. That's what we have today on that site.
So it's 15 units per
We'll
acre.
get to that in a moment, yeah. The Island Creek, Park at Island Creek site on your left, referred to as MCOD Tremont. As you can see, the bounds, again, have been drawn directly around the developed area. with the exception on the lower left there, you'll see there's a quadrant of street frontage at the very bottom that has some parking area in it. And then there's another area next to the highway, which has parking and some bit of a woodlot there. The bounds were drawn in this specific way with the help of our consultant from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council so that we can ensure compliance with the law. So we have a district on the left, which is a minimum of 25 acres. That satisfies the law. We have all of the districts are greater than 5 acres. That satisfies the law. And when you sum the acreage of both parcels and apply the density criteria which we are offering in the bylaw, it averages out to just under 16 units per acre. And we were given your direction to have a 5% buffer was a 750 requirement, and we wanted to have just 5% above, so 788 was the target. This plan comes in at the estimated capacity of 787 units, so it's right on the mark with what you asked for. And in terms of the 15 unit per acre, this is very confusing because the state requirement is a minimum of 15 unit per acre density. That's the way they stated it to us. Of course, for our purposes, we treat that as a maximum. We do want to see more than 15 units per acre, so that right away you have this kind of two perspectives. And then when you take into account that it's averaged across the entire district, including both sub-districts, you can vary that density. And that's the technique that we chose, again, in working with our consultant, because if you averaged it at 15 across the board, you actually get more units. It depends on the characteristics of the land itself. This is where it's a little hard to understand because you can't just say how many acres, how many units, that's the number. It doesn't work that way. They have to take the boundaries and put them into the model, and the model calculates the usability of the land and it modifies that density. So we have to rely on our consultants to run the model for us, and this is the best that we can do given the time and the criteria that you've given us.
So Tag, so you look at the Tremont one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's some, where you see the parking lot and the forest area, is that owned by a known entity?
I guess I'm going to have to do this. Yes, let's talk about the owners, because this
Yes.
does is it conveys additional rights onto the property owners, the right to develop multifamily within the town's bylaws. So you see here on MCOT Tremont, there are some lighter white lines. These are parcel boundaries
Yeah,
within the overall development, because this development was developed over many years. It took about
Right.
20 years to put all this in.
yeah.
This is the First Baptist Church, and
Yep.
this is the First Baptist Church parcel. So virtually all of the unimproved land is owned by the church.
So the church could sell that and build multifamily
Well,
housing
now
in
we're
that
into
area?
what if. What
No,
if?
I know, but I mean,
the
that's-
church found a way.
that's-
Well,
It's a
let me
potential.
mention that because, they are a gathering place, they are required under our bylaws to have sufficient parking. So
Okay.
this land is already improved with parking. It's been developed, other than this small piece out back, which I believe they use for recreation. So would they want to? I can't answer that question. We are scheduling, I think, a meeting with them to make sure that they understand this and answer any concerns that they have. But I don't have any direct feedback from that owner what their intention may be.
But also importantly, Fernando,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Theoretically, something could be sold,
Yes,
but mere zoning does not result in building. You also have to ensure there's sufficient water, septic, other utilities,
so hopefully the bylaw which we're writing makes that clear, that bylaw for that area should cover all those aspects of it, right? To make sure that setbacks, septic, all that stuff, when you look at it and you look at that parcel, makes it really difficult for that person to even contemplate building on it.
Title V applies regardless of zoning. So we can't modify Title V
If
for
you're-
the
I
zoning.
understand that, but
We-
if we apply Title V,
Yeah.
just say for instance, right? Just say for instance, the First Baptist Church, they're looking for some money,
Yep.
all right? They want to do something. And that zoning in there, we could sell it to a developer, right, to build multifamily housing. So when we look at that bylaw, which we're going to vote on and send to the planning board, when the developer looks at it, he says, actually, you know something? I can't do anything on it because there's so many restrictions placed in that zoning bylaw that makes it impossible for me to build. Is that what our bylaw states right now?
Well,
That,
I'll say no, just to give you the simple answer, but I want to back up a little bit because the calculations, again, I know will be asked, so I'll speak to it.
Yeah.
Because the density in the MCOT Kingstown is already at 12 units per acre, and the bylaw specifies a maximum density of 12 units per acre.
okay.
This conversation for that parcel is a moot point. They would have to obliterate the entire site, redevelop it, and they would end up with what they have now. So
Okay.
it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Now, in terms of the Island Creek Park development, the bylaw provides for a maximum density of 19 units per acre in that location.
19.
And if you look at that land area and the buildings that are there now, it is also, I think, at about 12 units per acre presently. So in terms of the what-if scenario, the most likely thing to happen is that Beacon Properties, or whoever the owner is at the time, would identify their oldest building that was fully depreciated and make a development decision to raise that and then rebuild it, with more capacity. That's really probably the only thing that is meaningful to talk about
Okay.
on the Tremont Street side.
But I think another component of that, and a concern, because our community is also concerned about affordable housing, and we need to remember that Island Creek is the biggest contributor to our inventory of affordable housing in town. And when the two, it was built out in 2 phases, and phase number 1, affordable housing, has expired. So as we move forward, and the phase 2 part of the affordable units, not that so these have just expired, and I'm hoping that the planning board will take steps to work with the developer to continue those units as affordable. I forgot where I was going. So the other affordables that were second phase are coming up for renewal in early 2030, so not that far away. I think another concern, because again, we want to try to provide insight to the voters on everything that could happen. Hopefully not, but my concern would be that should this pass zoning, the developer may seek to pull a permit, get some higher density, and reduce down the affordable component down to the 10%, which is in the bylaw, to get out from under that, because certainly there's more profitable housing to be had there. So I think that's another factor to put into this, and I think that you have to recognize that there's a chance to not only to build out some of the older buildings if they choose to do that. They could build out some of the newer buildings. They could. I mean, I think you have to try to anticipate what could happen.
Sure, yeah. Those are thought experiments that we all conduct, and so I think it's useful to have those publicly and discuss that and circle the question. And I appreciate your bringing up the point, and it is something that needs to be mentioned, that we do have a shortage of housing opportunity, as I like to call it, here in Duxbury. People who would like to be able to sell their large house and move to someplace smaller, and they're unable to. We have many residents who are users of the senior center who are former Duxbury residents who are now living in Plymouth, Pembroke, Kingston, because they can't find a place here in Duxbury. So in terms of this, again, focusing on the positive, I want to point out that not only is this a requirement of law, it's a need here in our community. So the fact that we are creating an opportunity for a successful property developer and operator to potentially increase the housing supply of these types of affordable, smaller units in our town is a benefit to our town. We have a lot of negative emotion surrounding the idea of development. Nobody likes to see, the forests cleared, and it is very upsetting. It's upsetting to me. We aren't facing that here. This is a site that is already fully developed. If we were going to anticipate and plan for additional affordable or accessible housing in the town of Duxbury, this is the best place to put it. I see very few drawbacks, in fact, to any redevelopment proposal that might come on this property, because there are no residential abutters, there are no neighbors who will be disturbed. The church, I certainly hope will be able to continue in their capacity as a faith-based organization. It may present an opportunity for them to provide housing for their very own members, and I would count that as a good thing. So I'd like to encourage a little bit more open-minded thinking about this rather than just the automatic response of, this is something we don't want. I understand that response. I don't like the way the state's gone about this. But when you step back and look at the overall needs of the town and the mandate that's before us and the technical work that we've had to do to be in compliance, this is actually a very good idea because it achieves the objective of complying with the law. It minimizes the risk of any negative impacts to any of our residents in town and could convey a benefit to our residents.
Can you address the affordable aspect, because Amy mentioned 10% in the bylaw?
Sure. I earlier mentioned the 40B statute. People may be aware that under a 40B development project, there's a requirement that 25% of the units be deed restricted as affordable, and they appear in our subsidized housing inventory, as you mentioned. The town, the 40B statute contains a threshold where if the town does not have 10% of its overall housing stock classified as affordable on the subsidized housing inventory, then we are still subject to the 40B statute. It's designed to get all the communities to gradually raise their level of proportion of affordable housing to about 10%. Duxbury, as last I knew, was at about 7.5%, 7.25%. So we are progressing towards that 10% threshold, but the progress is very, very slow. Every 40B development, and there are several on the books now that are progressing through construction, will add 25% of their units, but every single-family home adds to the numerator and thus reduces that ratio. This statute provides for, at the town's option, a 10% required affordability component. And that's what we have chosen to write into the bylaw under your direction in the planning board to require 10% of the units in new development to be affordable.
Well, it's a minimum of 10%.
It's a minimum of 10%. There is a possibility to go higher, up to 20%, if it can be
I
proven.
believe this group, the last time we talked about it, we're seeking 20%.
Yeah, the
minimum.
state only allows us to do 10 up to 20 with an analysis, a feasibility study that we would endeavor to do. But why don't we, let's keep this going, because I know that you've got the rest of the presentation, and we have a pretty long agenda too
Yeah.
tonight, so
Yeah.
go right ahead.
If we're done with this one, move on.
Yeah.
So this is the rationale of paper compliance, if you will, or technical compliance. As we just discussed at length, there's very little opportunity to add housing in the existing developed areas. Just the difficulty of doing construction in an already developed area alone presents challenges. We already talked about the village already being at its density, and any place where we have condos or cooperative associations, they are the owners and residents and would have to vote to tear their own building down, which we don't anticipate that happening. And then finally, the point we want to make here is that the existing park at Island Creek does have an on-site wastewater treatment facility, as any high-density construction here in Duxbury must, since we don't have municipal sewer. And as we understand it, that system is pretty much at or near capacity. So there's no ability to just add units. They would have to expand their wastewater or add a second wastewater treatment system. It's a significant expense. So, with that, I think I'd hand it over now to Steve.
Thank you, Ted. Steve Gant, I'm the chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group, a member of the Planning Board. And then just to finish on this slide too, and it bears emphasis, down you can see in the lower left, both Braintree and Hingham have pursued a very similar strategy to what we have, or what we're pursuing here, which is where they have also overlaid existing dense development, and they have submitted plans to the state, and the state has approved them. So we're fairly confident that the overall, the state may have, we don't anticipate this, but it's possible the state could have issues with specifics with regard to what we're proposing. But in terms of the overall plan, we're very confident that they would approve this plan to provide to overlay density. Good.
So Steve,
Yes,
we
Mike.
got the last minute no at town meeting last time. They also said they were going to come back to us and let us know if there was any additional language that they had problems with. Do we ever hear back from EOA Chelsea about the language that we used in the last bylaw, perhaps that we could incorporate here? If there were, did they ever
They never get back to us.
say anything else is wrong?
Sure. No, they did not tell us that there was anything else that was wrong with what we had submitted. Just so that we understand, we had requested a preliminary review from
Right.
the state at that time. And then given the short period of time between when we had finished drafting the bylaw and the map and then submitted it to the state, there was a limited period of time between then and special town meeting in November. So they were only able to give us that preliminary feedback.
I was talking about the last paragraph of that letter where it said, we'll get back to you, and we're happy to work with you.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, so they did not get back to us. My understanding is because we simply voted no.
I
And so,
get it.
yes.
And we changed our approach, too.
And we've changed our approach. So we have now, we just recently, this past week, I think it was just this past week, we submitted the bylaw and the map to the state for the same thing.
Right.
For a preliminary review, where we would get the preliminary feedback from them. And then if they did have issues, we would now have time to make corrections between now and special town meeting in June, depending on when they get back to us, of course.
Has KP Law reviewed our bylaw?
Yes, so the bylaw that we prepared, we went through several iterations, working through, Tag and I specifically, but then as part of the subcommittee, but then KP Law as well as the rest of the working group. Several iterations of going through the bylaw, several forms of review with KP Law, with others in the community who volunteered to assist us with this. So we're much more confident in this bylaw than we were with the one
Okay,
before.
thank you.
And
Uh,
Cindy, we can't see you on screen, so if you have questions, just jump in. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So what is Duxbury's strategy for compliance? So this is what it's kind of a summary of what we've already discussed. We're creating a plan that complies with the MBTA Communities Act in case our lawsuit fails. Again, minimal compliance is really what we're pursuing here by putting this overlay on already dense development. We're zoning properties, again, where development of the new housing would be extremely difficult or unlikely, without considerable cost or demolition of what's already there. We want to, the strategy also is we want to maintain our eligibility for state money and avoid enforcement action without creating new housing. Fernando, this gets back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier. There's this reference to the enforcement action. So in addition to possibly losing access to various grants, the state would also potentially be able to file suit against the town if we were non-compliant. They would be able to file suit against the town to compel us to comply with the law. And if we continue to fail to do that, we would run the risk of being in violation of a court order. And that could raise all kinds of different exposures for the town if that happened. Another possibility is that they would be able to come in and they would be able to actually impose districts of their own choosing. It may have nothing to do with the ones that we've chosen. And they may also impose a bylaw, again, that we would have no input on and no control over. So that's another possibility of what could happen if we're non-compliant. So.
Correct.
So that's again, we're seeking to avoid that. So that's again part of our strategy behind this plan. But then if the law does become invalid, if our complaint is successful, then we could respond. So let's say, for example, we voted yes at special town meeting in June, and it was on the books. But then later on, the law was declared invalid, or we were no longer required to enforce it or to have it in place. We could respond by repealing the bylaw at a future town meeting to remove those overlay districts and our obligation to comply. That's just an option that we have if in the event that it's invalidated at some point in the future.
If the law is invalid, I mean, that would have to, the legislator would have to.
Well, if a court somehow ruled that the whole thing's invalid, we would want to take advantage
I
of that
thought
opportunity.
the court's already ruled that it's valid.
That's correct.
The SJC said it was valid, for maybe there's some other reason that somebody else challenged it with, I don't know.
Well, the whole unfunded mandate litigation is still on the table. And I try
Right.
to play it out in my head, and I don't have the answer. But, so if you think about the unfunded mandate part of this, and we understand that in order to get around that, the state would need to try to estimate the cost, the impact cost to each community that is being asked to do this, and then provide funds to cover that cost. So if we were to vote this in now without that issue being settled in the courts, are we leaving potential money on the table that we would not then therefore be able to get?
I think on this question, we're not town council, and I think we should probably have them in here at some point before
big
town meeting.
question.
And all these questions about unfunded mandate or law becoming invalid should be, we should be clear to the town about. I
Yes.
think it's two separate issues. We've asked this group in parallel with that to get this to town meeting. And I realize that it delves into this, but it's, we charged you with putting together a bylaw, and you've done an excellent job. So I think that's where we are right now. These legal questions, I think we should have Amy Questle in here.
Agreed. Can I point out one other area that may really come back to bite you? Back to the site plan maps, you've got, I believe it's
Could you dial it back to the maps there? Thank you.
20.65 on the village parcel.
Mm-hmm.
Is it maybe 20.65 or 55, I can't see it.
That's
And then
20.65. yeah.
29.47, so you're right up at the 50-acre minimum. You are right there.
It's like 50.1.
You've got that little point on the Island Creek. See the little triangle?
On the right?
So our zoning bylaw doesn't let you count that. I don't know what that actually translates. You know what I mean? Our bylaw won't let you count a certain portion of that point, depending on how narrow that comes down. So you might just want somebody to check on that, because you're very tight with your acreage.
We're very tight. That was intentional. We wanted to make sure that we.
Oh, I
you know, we're not-
appreciate that, but that really, I don't know.
The hook.
Could
We,
be a problem.
yes, we reviewed this in great detail with our consultant, with MAPC, and they've assured us that these districts are compliant and that they,
Okay.
you know, in
So they
terms
know,
of
I
size
mean,
at
it's
least.
kind of an unusual zoning bylaw that we have there with that point thing, but.
Yes, yes.
Oh, we keep going.
Thank you. Yep, so maybe, so we went through that one, did that one. Oh, okay, and so then we'll kind of tweak that around, what's next, we'll redo that. Mentioned the information session, we had one last week on the 29th. Our next one is going to be on May 28th, 6 to 8 p.m. That's in the Mary Room at the library. And then one during the daytime, June 4th, 1 to 3 p.m. All three of those, the one and then the other two will be in the Mary Room.
What was attendance like for the April 29th meeting?
Fernando, frankly, it was thin. I think we had about 8 people show up.
8 people.
Yes, so we are looking to, we're doing more aggressive outreach now.
Right.
We've got a presence on the planning department website. We're looking to do a press release. We'll be doing some other, and we're discussing some other outreach efforts that we'll be making to get the public's attention on this and get more engagement.
But the working group has limited resources.
Yeah,
We-
no,
we-
no, I
We didn't give
understand
them a
that.
budget,
Yeah.
so working with what we got.
We're giving them as much as we can give them.
Yeah.
And then on May, so then in between now and the May 28th, on May 12th, Tag had mentioned this earlier, we will have the public hearing is scheduled for the planning board. We'll be addressing the map and the bylaw. That will be in the senior center. And then, of course, on June 16th is the special town meeting vote. And I think that was next slide. I think that was it.
I think there's a QR
And
code
then,
that
yep,
folks can
we
go
got the
to.
QR code, so pull out your phones, pull it
High
up.
tech.
Nice.
Access to all kinds of resources that we've been putting together and working on.
But better than writing down a long link.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what we're presenting to the public. That's what we did present to them, and that's what we will be presenting to them at our other public outreach sessions. Oh, I will also mention too, we have individual, so Fernando, to your point, we also have individual members of the working group reaching out and engaging individually or with different town departments and different town organizations to do the same presentation and then to answer any questions that they have so that they can understand what's happening and then communicate to the constituencies that they represent what's going on and then encouraging them to become more informed and then to get out and vote on the 16th as well.
QR code works.
Yes, look at that, see?
All right,
We've learned a few things.
all right. Thank you, Steve.
So, yes, so we'll open it up for other questions and discussion.
Anything
I think I'm
further?
ready for a vote.
This is also going to be heard
Yep.
at the planning board.
Yes.
Yes.
Then that will be the public hearing. This isn't a
We're
public
just
hearing this
kicking
evening.
it back to the planning
Yeah,
board.
that's what we're doing.
And we
Hill has a question.
So,
we
There's
do not
any questions
have,
from the audience?
and we also do not have an article in front of us, so we'll have this on a future agenda for recommendations of the article. Town meeting.
all right,
And we're going to meet with town council prior to that.
Let's hope so.
Okay, there's,
all right.
Hi.
Do it. I guess we can take some, go right ahead, Christine.
Figure out when I'm supposed to talk. I'm just wondering, to Mike McGee's point, we charge you with putting together a bylaw, and that Amy Questle should be the person who's making the judgments about all these legal risks, really? I'm just wondering, I've been talking to a lot of attorneys over the last week about this situation. And there were a lot of things said in the presentation today, for example, about the interpretation of what is applicable, if applicable, about the number of communities that are really required to participate in the MBTA communities laws. There's just a lot of legal statements in this presentation that don't seem, well, lawyers disagree, but they don't seem to be, there doesn't seem to be a consensus on them. So I'm just wondering if it's appropriate to have the MBTA communities group giving presentations on the law. I mean, even when they were talking about the potential consequences if the town didn't follow through on this, it doesn't match up with what Amy Questle said earlier in the year when she was talking about what the consequences would be.
All right.
And that's my question.
So what's your, well, it sounds like a comment, Christine, but I think to your point, we're hoping to have, I mean, I have asked, and I don't know if my board members share it, is that we have Amy Questle in here if people have questions about the law and this unfunded mandate status. And I think people are going to have those questions at town meeting. So I think it's important. And I guess to your point, to ask Steve Gant or anybody else to respond to legal questions right now is probably a tough spot to put them in. We've not asked them to do that.
Yeah, agreed. We should get legal counsel to weigh on these. And then we need to do it before the town meeting, right? Because these
Yes.
questions are going to come up at town meeting as well.
Yeah, and the awkward thing that
Yeah.
it continues to exist is
Yes.
that unlike most articles, there's typically a proponent. There is no proponent for this. It's the state saying we have to do it.
Yeah.
So the MBTA Communities Working Group is doing the best it can to try to, without taking the position as the advocate,
That's
that
right.
this is a good thing to do, somebody has to answer these questions. So the MBTA Communities Group, I think, is doing a terrific job in
Correct.
trying to anticipate and answer those questions without anybody really cheering with the pom-pom saying, pass this.
Yeah.
And Christine, to your point, there's a lot of the information that the MBTA Communities Working Group is sharing comes straight from the state itself. So there isn't a lot of interpretation that we're doing here. We're simply passing along information that the state set forth on on its website and in other places, and certainly arguments it's making in the legal case, but we won't get into the legal issues. Did we have questions here in the room? Yes, Tanya.
Tanya Trevison, 21 Tinker's Ledge Road. I just had a question about the property overlay at the Village of Duxbury, because the map that was shown with the parcel outline in yellow was only a part of the village. I understand that they own another area, like Queen Anne's Way, and that, and I was wondering why that was not included, and if the village also owns any other surrounding parcels that could potentially be taken in the future. Just to clarify.
Sure.
Thank you.
Michelle, could you dial back to the map there? Come on. There we go.
Hold on, I gotta go.
Let's get over here. It's coming. And the short answer, Tanya, while it's coming up, the answer is yes, they do own more than the outline that you saw up here, but I'll be able to get more specific with it.
You want to take the overlay?
Yes, that had the two maps that were side by side.
Right there, yeah.
You have to close the pop-up first.
There we go. Try it for free. There we go. Okay. So right here, so this is the Village of Duxbury is right here. And so Tanya, the answer is yes, they do own more than this yellow outline. They actually own this greenfield parcel up here as well. So when we talk about the Village of Duxbury and what they own, it would be this that you see in yellow as well as all of that up there. They also own this over here where you see Queen Anne Way, Winterbury Lane, Blackberry Path. They also own that. So those are single family or townhomes over here. Those are independent living, but they also own that. That is not part of what we're overlaying here. This right here, this abutter. This is a skilled nursing facility that's owned by Bain Care. They're out of Irvine, California. That's where the owner is. And then it also includes this right here. This is the Village of Duxbury
Memory care.
Memory care facility. So it does include that facility there. And then this right here, this parcel up here, is part of the Bonji site. Notice that is not part of what we had overlaid here. And then this is the O'Neill Farm over here. Once again, not part of what we're overlaying. And then everything else is pretty much individually owned single-family homes down here along Stockade and Wildflower
So
Path.
we're only proposing to zone what's in the yellow,
That's exactly right.
regardless
yes.
of where the actual property lines are.
Or
Right.
ownership
Yes.
beyond the district.
Yes, and so, but then to your question, why did we do it this way? So the reason for that is because what we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure that we were overlaying just areas that were already fully developed, so that we were minimizing the possibility that there would be any significant new construction in the near term. In other words, if we were to have included all of this land up here that the village owned, in addition to this, and in addition to that over there, that would have been a lot more land than we needed, because again, 50 acres is what we need to have as an overlay. That would have added land that we wouldn't have needed for compliance purposes, number one. And number two, would have increased the possibility that there was new development at some point in the near future. So that's why we restricted it to this area.
All right.
You're welcome, sure.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? All right, so that presentation was helpful for us in understanding the overall situation, but also in connection with what we're actually going to propose to the planning board.
Yep.
So if there's nothing else, why don't we take a motion for referral?
Yeah, I move that the Select Board refer the proposed MBTA outreach bylaw as presented or amended to the Planning Board for their review and a public hearing.
Do we have a second? All right, since we have Cindy remote, we'll do a roll call. Cindy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Cindy, aye.
Fernando, aye.
Michael, aye.
Brian, aye.
Amy, aye.
All right, excellent. Thank you
Thank
all
you
very
both.
much. And I think you're sticking around for the ADU? Somebody sticking around for ADU? Why don't we move on now to the accessory dwelling unit ADU bylaw transmittal from the planning board to the select board. The select board is being asked to vote on referring the proposed bylaw to the planning board for their review/public hearing. And this will be presented by the planning board. We have
I'll be happy to stand.
Mr. Carpenter. Go right ahead.
The ADU bylaw, this is another state mandate. People aren't familiar with it. It's very straightforward in comparison to MBTA communities. The state has required, not required, or passed an additional right for property owners of single-family homes to construct an accessory dwelling unit, which is specifically identified as a protected use accessory dwelling unit. And this set a standard for an ADU. An ADU is an apartment or a granny flat, or there's other terms for them, but a second living unit on the same property. And the criteria promulgated by the state are that it must be no larger than 900 square feet in living area or 1/2 the size of the existing residence, whichever is smaller, and that it basically otherwise complies with zoning bylaws, septic, water, all those things, and confers upon the municipalities the responsibility to acknowledge this in their zoning and dress it up or apply appropriate standards as we see fit. And so here in Duxbury, we've done just that. We have really the only criteria we've added are to require 1 additional parking spot per ADU. If it's not within a half mile of transit, that's required by the state. Doesn't apply anywhere in town.
No.
And also, it was important to the town of Duxbury that the granting of this right for protected use ADUs does not also confer any short-term rental rights. So these, the ADU bylaw as passed in Duxbury is, again, 900 square feet, 1 parking space, compliance with all the bylaws, and no short-term rentals. That's what we're putting forward.
And site
Right.
plan review? Will this have a site plan review component?
Yeah.
And who will be doing
The
the site?
planning board, I think, is the governing body for the site plan review. That's existing responsibility.
Other questions?
Yeah, it's just functionally. I just planned this out. So if somebody builds an ADU for their relatives, or maybe their children are sticking around, they move out because we have that no short-term rental portion. What happens to the ADU?
Well, it will be available for lease, rented to someone on a longer-term basis.
Long-term basis, yeah.
We do have an existing bylaw which allows for a family-occupied unit of 850 square feet, and that is not valid under state law because the state does not allow us to restrict the relationships amongst the tenants. That is something that is no longer permissible.
Effectively becomes a two-family.
I understand.
Yeah. I call it double bunking. We're double bunking.
Okay.
Double bunking.
I have a question for Mary. These ADUs, is any upside on the financial end of things? Could this create new growth or anything?
Absolutely. Absolutely, any new structure on a property.
Yeah, sure.
The answer is yes. Any new structure constructed on a property would be captured as new growth and added to the tax levy. Absolutely.
However, the long-term impacts of the services that second dwelling will receive is a drain on the other residents. So it's a double-edged sword.
All right. Any
Depends
other
on the
comments or
I do have a
questions?
question
Go right
about
ahead,
the
Amy.
pre-existing non-conforming structure. So this, I struggled, and I'm still struggling with this paragraph, because we have a lot of pre-existing non-conforming lots and structures in this town, pretty much all the Washington, I mean, they're everywhere. So in this case, if you were, in the regular zoning world, if you were seeking to do something pre-existing non-conforming, you have to get a special permit before the zoning board. If you are pre-existing non-conforming and you are looking to do an accessory dwelling unit, it says here, it says here that if the principal dwelling to which an ADU will be added is a pre-existing non-conforming structure or is located on a non-conforming lot, and the alteration or extension to add an ADU will increase such non-conformity or create a new non-conformity, said extension or alteration shall be subject to General Law 48, Section 6, Section 401 of the bylaw, provided, however, that a special permit shall not be required, but a majority of the Zoning Board of Appeals shall make a finding that the proposed alteration of the structure is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. I read it over. Can you please help?
Sure, I can take a crack at that, and I have to, of course, state the disclaimer that I am not a lawyer, so this is not authoritative. It's my understanding that this is, the ADU statute does not override our local zoning bylaws. It establishes a right for an ADU. Where we have existing non-conforming, these are the constraints that we enforce within our town. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, as you know, is the body which adjudicates those decisions. So, in this case, because it is a by right, we are not allowed to require a special permit. However, Mass General Law does provide for consultation between the bodies, and the Planning Board, in the case of a nonconformance, would rely upon the Zoning Board of Appeals to make a determination as to whether that nonconformity was excessively increased, right? There's a threshold. And so it's my understanding that the Planning Board would be within its rights to deny the site plan review based on a Zoning Board of Appeals negative finding.
Okay.
And that's why it's stated that the Zoning Board of Appeals will make a finding. They have to make a finding.
Okay.
You'd make a heck of a lawyer. That was good.
Thank you. Well,
All right, any other questions or comments? May I have a motion?
I move that the Select Board refer the proposed accessory dwelling unit ADU bylaw as presented or amended to the Planning Board for the review and public hearing.
Second.
We have, okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Cindy?
Cindy, aye.
Fernando, aye.
Michael, I.
Brian, aye.
Amy, aye.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Planning Board.
Thank you.
Great job tonight. Next, we are moving on to discussion pertaining to fiscal 27 budget planning, presented by Mary McKinnon, our finance director. Mary?
Would you guys mind taking one of these, passing it down to the patient review? Remotely.
Look at this. That yours? There we go.
Oh, I don't have That's okay. We love your spreadsheet. We can come out. I emailed you just now while we were sitting here.
Is she left-handed? Is that why she
Yeah, I think
does
so,
them
yeah.
on that side? Are you left-handed, Mary?
I'm sorry, say again?
Are you left-handed?
Left-handed? No. I fed it into the copier a certain way.
Okay.
I was trying to,
That's what happened.
All right, take it away.
I'm trying to share my
Oh,
screen.
okay.
One second, just so the folks in the room.
I see you.
Back at it again.
And Mary, as you're pulling that together, the reason we have this tonight is because this board has been asking to be involved earlier in the process. And given that we're not even at fiscal 26 yet, we figured why not start talking about fiscal 27. So here we are.
Exactly, thank you, Brian.
Let me turn
Really
this
like
on.
good news.
I'm sorry. So let me, I want to start with a couple of disclaimers, and thank you, Brian, for jumping in where I was going to start. We are still in FY25, and we have not completed our work through FY25. We have recently adopted an FY26 budget that clearly did not satisfy the desires of a number of folks who are part and parcel of putting together those budgets. And so now here we are trying to understand and be forward thinking about what can we do to prevent even further dire situations as we begin to look for at the FY27 budget. I'm going to show some documents up here on the screen that I know some folks are going to follow along, and I've handed them out to you. But let me start with a disclaimer that this is not the FY27 budget. These documents, these numbers, these charts should absolutely not be construed as the first pass of an FY27 budget. This is a conversation starter, and that is the goal and the objective here tonight. So what I have done is I have put together a couple of charts that I'm going to walk you through as quickly as possible. And as we talked about before, we are going to leave the select board tonight with some homework to do. And that involves looking at these charts a little bit deeper and then coming back to the board with some conversation regarding budgetary policy and strategy. So the idea is that we're starting here today at the beginning of May. We are going to give you 1 month to digest this and come back at the beginning of June in order to determine and provide some feedback on a policy. Between May and June, what I anticipate is that you guys are going to have some questions and you're going to look for some additional information, in which case you're going to reach out to either Rainey or myself, and we will provide that for you so that we can give you what you need in order to establish that framework and that policy in June. Does that make sense?
Yep, sounds
Okay.
good.
So
Sounds outstanding.
Fantastic. So what we're going to do here is start at a real high level. We promised you a 30,000-foot view, and in this packet that I have given out to you, I have also numbered the pages in the lower right-hand corner, so I'm going to refer to those. This is page number 1, and this is just the 30,000-foot view of the last couple of adopted budgets, and now that we have a final FY26 adopted budget that is forever going to be referred to as 5A, I have dropped those into the framework of our budgetary forecast, and I have also preliminarily updated projections for local receipts and for state aid. And at a very high level, this is the net result. So FY26, the year that we just passed, is in the center of the page. And as we start to look to the right for 27 through 30, based on a set of assumptions and based on the budget we just passed, we are clearly starting off the process still in a structural deficit, which we knew that was going to happen through the course of our conversations. Now, before we get into details, I do want to say that this structural deficit that we're looking at here preliminarily, and again, it's not the budget, that estimate does not include restoring any of the positions that were reduced in the 5A budget. So this is simply the 5A budget with some realistic updates to revenue projections and some assumptions to our costs, which we're going to go through in a moment. Okay? So that being said, you can flip to the second page. Okay. So now the second page, on page 2 and page 3, this is our standard budgetary forecast that the format of the forecast that we've used in the past. So this is just taking that summary chart we looked at a moment ago and drilling in a little deeper. Page number 2 is all of our revenue sources and available funds that are utilized to fund our budget. And the subsequent page is the expenditures. So taking a look across the top, and we'll just do a high-level overview. The first section deals with our property tax levy. So this is our primary source of revenue. As we know, it can grow up to 2.5% in total on an annual basis, and then any additional new growth, whether it's via ADUs or something else, is added to the tax levy in order for us to compute our levy limit. Then we have our voter-approved excluded debt, and that added to the levy limit becomes our maximum allowable tax levy. We know that that revenue is constrained. There's not, at this point, on this sheet of paper, there is not anything, decision that we can make that would affect that calculation. That is a standard calculation. Then we move into what are the other additional sources of revenue. The first one is state aid. And in your packet, I'm not going to go through the details, but in your packet on page 5, I've given you the detail behind state aid. State aid is comprised of both receipts and assessments. I think you guys are familiar with that concept. So when you're looking at page 2 and you're looking at your revenue sources and you want to see the detail, you're going to flip to page 5 to see the detail for state aid. Secondarily to that is local receipts. These are the items that we control here at the local level through value determinations on what kind of community and what kind of service and programs we want to offer here at the local level, for which we would charge a fee of some sort in order to cover those costs. So the detail for local receipts is listed or included on page 6. And we've talked about this before, but I also want everyone to understand when it comes to local receipts, there is a component of local receipts called the MRGF, which is the Municipal Revenue Growth Factor. And what happens with the Municipal Revenue Growth Factor is that there are certain categories, I'm looking at this page here, Michael, for a second. There are certain categories of local receipts that a community controls. However, if you have success in increasing those local receipts, it is somewhat held against you from the state's perspective. And that is because communities who are able to generate additional revenue in certain categories and increase their ability to fund their programs, it is held against you in the formulas for calculating state aid because you have the capacity to grow your municipal revenues. All right, so those categories are lightly highlighted. When you look at the detail of the local receipts sheet on page 6, those are the ones that are highlighted at the top and bottom in a light green color. Okay?
So I'm just trying to.
Meals excise, right? So that's one of them.
Yeah,
Think about that.
A meal, boat excise, penalty and interest, yeah? And then.
Pilots, if you have the ability to have certain arrangements where you're negotiating pilots and you're increasing your revenues. So there are certain components.
Is the beach included in this?
Yeah.
17, I'm trying to see if it's highlighted. It doesn't look like it's highlighted.
Nope, it's not.
Okay,
That's considered a permit.
permit, yeah, okay, good,
Okay?
thank you.
All right, so then beyond that, again, I'm still on page 2, which is sort of the second level or second tier of our dive into our revenues. The remaining items that are listed below state aid and local receipts are what are called other available funds. So those are funds that we have on hand for a reason, and they are restricted in use to support part of our operating budget. So this sum total comprises our revenue portfolio that is available to support our general fund operating budget. Any questions on that? Okay. Now, if I flip down to the next page, which is page 3 of your handout, down arrow is not working. This is the expenditure side. So what this is reflecting is the adopted budgets for 24 and 25, the adopted 5A budget for 26, which we just took to town meeting, and then 27 through 30 is projected using the assumptions that are located in the far right-hand column. So this is not an individual look at a department's budget. It is holistically looking at that grouping of expenditures that we've just spent the last 9 months doing a deep dive into, and applying these assumptions to those categories in order to project or forecast at a high level what expenditures might look like if these assumptions were to be the basis for us to develop an FY27 budget.
Yep.
Okay?
Per annum?
I'm sorry?
Those increases are per annum, the 3%?
Correct, yes, yes. All right. On the next page, I'm going to actually, before I flip off of page 3, I'm going to highlight something to you. On page 3, on row 48, Does everybody see the row number to the left?
yep.
Okay.
Additional capital project.
So that is a new line item that I have included in this forecast, and you'll see that there is an amount set in there for fiscal '27 through '30. One of the things that we have talked about numerous times throughout our work with the Finance Committee and the Select Board over the last couple of budget seasons is that as our budgets are getting tighter and tighter, we are losing capacity in our levy to fund debt service, to take care of the long laundry list of capital requests that are out there, even the smaller ones. So one of the budgetary policies that the town has established, so we have adopted financial policies, and one of those policies in there talks about making sure that we have capacity within our levy to fund debt service. So I've added that line with an amount. That amount does not get us to reach the calculation. So if you flip the page to page 4, there is that calculation. So we have financial policies that govern a lot of the decision-making that we do, but there are some financial policies that we need to be a little bit more aggressive into incorporating in our budgetary framework. So the policy states that we should be having at least 1 to 2.5% of our net operating revenues available as levy capacity to fund those capital items. If you look at this calculation and you look at the very bottom row, where I have included the $250,000, we are still short or shy of that 1% target.
Yeah.
Okay? So that needs to be a decision on whether we are going to hold hard and fast that recommendation and make sure that we continue to build that capacity back. Okay?
Okay.
All right. What I have also included in your packet, if you flip, so we talked about page 5 being state aid. Quite honestly, here in the town of Duxbury and many communities like this, state aid is relatively flat year over year. There's very little fluctuation in state aid. You're considered a minimum aid community because we have the property wealth and income wealth that qualifies us or penalizes us, I should say, to becoming a minimum aid community. And therefore, when Chapter 70 amounts come out, there's really not very much variation for us. Local receipts is on page 6. And again, those are the items that, oh, I should keep flipping along. Sorry, you guys could have yelled at me. I could have flipped the page over here. Local receipts are the items that we have fee hearings for, traditionally, a large number of them. And we will be holding a fee hearing on June 6th, I think is our next one, to revise some of those.
Correct.
Okay, local receipts. So now I'm going to flip over, just in case everybody wants to see it. This is what the local receipts chart looks like that we were just talking about. Okay. And I'll scan a copy of this and put it on the Finance Committee website tomorrow, or Finance website tomorrow, so folks can see it. But I want to draw your attention to one of the last chart that I did include here, which is this one. So using the 5A budget that we just passed at town meeting, this takes a different look at the budget, if you will, by category. So we talk quite a bit about us being a service-driven organization, and that across a number of our departments, our biggest expense is labor. And so what I'm giving you here is another way to look at the budget, one row per department. The first set of columns are the categories of compensation for our labor. So regular salaries, base pay, part-time salaries for intermittent and seasonal in various departments, overtime for those departments who require the use of overtime, any stipends, outside police details, any clothing allowances, and then a subtotal. So those are our traditional categories of compensation that would appear on a W-2 for our employees. Then in one column, lump sum expenses by department, and then a grand total with an allocation of how those departments are made up between what percent is labor and what percent is expense for their overall budget. Okay?
One thing, Mary, that would help me anyway, the request, is I wouldn't mind a head count.
So that was going to be the next step.
Okay.
And so what I anticipate is that you folks are going to need to have some additional information as you start to individually look at this budgetary information. Let me know what you need, and I can put that together and get that out to the group so that everybody has access to the same information. And what I anticipate is at your next meeting, which are they having a meeting, Rainey, 2 weeks from today? Mm-hmm. Okay. Depending on your review of this material, we may want to do a touch base
Okay?
at your next meeting in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And then that way you will have sufficient information to make your final determination at your first meeting in June.
Good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, can you send me emails, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, absolutely, Cindy, you bet. I apologize.
No.
You said you weren't going to be here, and I didn't do it. My bad.
No problem. Just didn't want to spread more COVID.
I will send that over to you this evening, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. The other thing that I do have here is because I did add that line for capital, and I drew your attention to it, I'm going to ask you to also take one of these and pass it down. That is the capital schedule from the last round of capital review.
Yep.
So it is the FY '26 through FY '30 capital list, because I know there's going to be some questions on what did get included or what's on the radar. If you look at the FY '26, do you have an extra? I'm just going to borrow this for a second. If you look at the FY '26 column, there are a number of items that are highlighted in a color, and there's various colors. The ones that have been shaded in a color are items that we did fund through some mechanism in FY '26.
Mary, just a point of order here. Can you put it on the screen?
Oh, I can, yep. Sorry, here, I'll give you that.
Thank you.
You bet. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay. So these items that were highlighted in colors, purple is that it was funded via ARPA, blue funded via town meeting, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you have a legend on here somewhere?
I do not. The bottom line is the items that were shaded were funded.
All right.
That was more for me.
Bless you.
And the reason that I'm giving this out to you is A, so that you can see what is on the radar before we even open this up to departments for their newest round of requests. But I also want you to understand that as Alex gets up every year and talks about capital, there is always a multi-million-dollar request list of capital items, and we cannot possibly fund the entire suite of requests on an annual basis. So as we start to talk about FY '27 and outer years, we also need to make sure we go back and look at FY '26 and the items that need to be carried forward and prioritize those. Okay?
Great.
All right.
Excellent.
Any questions or any other additional information that you need from me before you get started?
Anything
I'll
from
send
the
you
board?
I'll send you formally the request for the head count.
Okay,
All right,
marvelous, thank
Nothing
you.
from the board. I see there's a, Christine, you have a hand up that you have a question?
Yeah, it's just, you can hear me, right? I'm sorry I keep
Go ahead.
asking. It's hard for me and some other people I talk to when we're reading the budget to figure out what the benefits, there's that, like, in the last budget, I think it was lines 81 to 87, what the benefits are per employee. So we know that there's a salary cost for the employee, but we don't know what the additional costs are for the employee. So it's kind of confusing. I don't know if Mary can help us with that.
Sure. There, in the shared costs?
But like, if, for example, if we have an employee who's, like, if there's a department and it has 3 people, you have the salaries, but what are the benefits per person in that for that department?
So there is, you're not going to know exactly what the benefits are for an individual employee. We're not going to disclose what programs people are enrolled in. Plus, people go in and come out of benefit programs all throughout the year. So there is more of a percentage, a fringe percentage that is used, and that's standard budgetary practice. There are some shared costs like Medicare, which is a fixed calculation, 1.45% of a person's overall compensation is subject to Medicare, but with benefits, it's typically a fringe calculation that's used. And
Could you provide some information so that when the public is reading these budgets, they at least get like an estimate so that they can figure out how much it is per employee? Like the 1.45% was really interesting, was really helpful, but if we just had some range of how much it's gonna cost per employee for these benefits, it would be helpful.
Okay, but remember that not every employee takes benefits, right? So there's a general calculation that's used.
Okay. So, for instance, on line 900, right, that's employee benefits and shared costs. For instance, in 26, it's 16.9 million, right?
Correct.
So we know what the head count is roughly. We'll have that, we can divide the head count into that number, and we get a rough number.
You do,
good.
right? And
Yeah.
so that includes pension,
Yep,
health insurance,
Right.
life insurance,
Yeah.
Medicare,
Right.
all of those programs.
but, that's as close as we can get. Total number of employees, and we can divide it into that, for instance, 26 is 16.9 million, right? That gives us a rough number.
You could do it that way, but remember that not every employee is benefit eligible.
Sure.
Right, we're
There's
talking just
part-time,
ballparks, right?
There's got
Exactly.
part-time, yeah,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
Some people get their health
Which
insurance through their spouse.
Sure.
They
Yep.
do, which is why we spend a lot of time sort of looking at these
Right.
costs in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
All right.
You might want to.
Are there any retirees in that, or is it just all current employees?
Say that, I'm sorry.
It's federally
Hold on,
protected
Christine.
Information, we cannot disclose the individuals.
Correct, I just said that. We
Right.
couldn't, well, we would never
Yeah.
give out information on an individual employee,
Yeah.
ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's,
I'm just wondering if there's any retirees in that big bucket, or if it's just all current employees?
The cost of retiree health insurance that the town pays is included in that health insurance calculation.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate
Sure.
it.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay, because we don't have anything else on the board, right? I think we're all good up here?
Could I?
Go right ahead, Amy.
Just under the line item about the 4th of July celebration, and I know that last year, for the first time, there wasn't an article put in to the warrant, and that's kind of resulted in the parade costs and the festivities costs being put into the budget, the 5A budget, which now is, the leanest thing ever. So there's a concern that the festivities won't be able to move forward. I'm a little bit confused on that because, and I want to try to understand that in the 5A budget that the festivity costs were put into, or I guess I should say that the cost to cover everything would have been in the override budget, and because the override budget didn't fail, because it failed, now that we're at the 5A budget, there isn't the amount of money necessary to cover the police and fire for the festivities. And when we were, understanding the 5A budget, we knew that if the override failed, the 5A budget could only be balanced and the departments could only function with the result of laying off or not filling certain positions within those departments. And I thought that was the amount that was necessary in order for that department to continue, was as devastating as that was, it was the loss of 2 positions or whatever. How is it now? I'm trying to understand why the money isn't still in that budget to cover the costs of covering the festivities. Am I saying this right?
So we have a 4th of July parade we really care about. Are we going to have it? How are we going to pay for it? Are we having any issues?
Sure.
Yeah,
I was trying to.
The 4th of July parade
little bit
costs about
differently.
$40,000 to hold. Town meeting typically appropriates $25,000. The overtime for police and fire to work that event, the 4th of July parade itself, comes to $23,000. Add to that also a Labor Day beach party that costs $8,000 to run, and the police and overtime for that is $17,000. So you've got $48,000 worth of celebrating and $40,000 worth of overtime that go with those 2 celebrations. So the cost of those 2 things is $88,000. The town appropriates $25,000 to the committee to use at their discretion, leaving a difference of $63,000 that they have to make up.
Right, well, and the 63 in years before this had been those details or
Overtime costs.
right,
Yes.
but it had been part of their budget. It
They were
had been
simply
part of
eaten by the
police and
departments,
Right,
yes.
so now it's,
because they had the staff
Yep.
on
They
board
had
for
adequate
their
staff
basic
and
shifts.
adequate funding. Correct.
And now with the reduction in staff, their overtime dollars are going to be exclusively used for their shift coverage.
And now they're faced with the
that's-
choice.
So we did meet with some members of the beach committee, asking them about their fundraising efforts to see if there was additional opportunity to.
4th of July committee, that is.
I'm sorry, what did I?
Yeah,
Beach committee.
Fourth-
Oh, I
Fourth.
apologize, 4th of July, yes. It's late, we've been here since 6 o'clock.
yeah.
Asked them about their fundraising efforts to see if there was an opportunity to get some additional private partnerships to help offset this, this expense. Because we know that we've got a lean budget going into FY '26, and we need to make sure that we've got every dollar being utilized to cover our core services. So that's what happened with
And they
beach.
explained to us that
Not
they
the
raise
beach,
about
what was it?
$20,000 a year in donations, so that leaves them roughly 30-something thousand, 35,000 short.
yeah, it's my understanding that, these festivities are really in jeopardy, and I understand, town meeting spoke, but at the same time, these festivities are part of the fabric of our community and important to a lot of people.
And
I
we've
don't
been able to-
disagree, and they were aware of that, and we mirrored that concern, particularly the 4th of July parade, but as we had tried to carefully explain, it may be a question of one versus the other, not being able to do both, based on the limited financial constraints that we're operating under.
Just 2 comments on this. Number one, we've been able to do this for years with the police and fire
Yep.
at the staffing level it was at. And 2, this either or. People are lined up on the bridge with paper purchases of beach stickers to go to that Labor Day party. We make money for that beach simply on that party. And I know it sounds crazy, but people literally spend $180 to drive onto that beach for one day. So we're making money off of that. So I would encourage us to, I appreciate, and I think there's probably opportunities for that group to fundraise, but they are volunteers, and this is good. This is probably a good way to get some PR out there so that they can fundraise for this. But I think we also need to realize that we have been able to do this, and this is a piece of this is a huge aspect, the parade especially, is a big aspect of this town, and that beach party raises revenue. So I think all those things need to be considered here. And if we're to move forward with another budget to address the deficit, I think we all need to work together here in a positive way. And that's, I'll leave it at that.
I agree. I think that, it's been a divisive time. It's been a tough time, and to try to, come about this in a spirit of community and getting through some tough times, whether it's at every level, it's hitting us. So I think that our approach and our commitment is very important as we go through this. And I would like to see the police and
What's
fire
wrong?
reconsider.
Do you have something, did you want to say something about that?
Well, hold on just a second.
No,
Just letting Brian know that I had something to say after he finishes, of course.
Okay,
Oh,
of course.
sorry.
yeah.
Thank you. Well, I lost my train of thought also.
Okay.
Oh my
Betsy,
God,
if you'd-
welcome to my world.
Betsy,
Please go to the mic so folks at home can hear you.
I know I'm going to sound judgy, and I don't mean to sound judgy, but optics. We are laying people off. We have departments that are underfunded. We have decisions that we have made that were acknowledged to not be in the best interest of continuing on, and we're talking about a party. It's a lovely party. It's a great party, but unless it is self-sustaining, unless it can pay for itself through either donations or contributions, taking any money from the overtime budget of the public safety, especially because we have certainly heard from the public that they are deeply concerned about public safety, is tone deaf. I mean, it is completely tone deaf. That what we are facing next year is not a shortfall on a party. It is a shortfall on people, and it is a shortfall on our ability to conduct business in a systemic way. And that's all I've got to say about it. And
Thank you.
it's
Betsy.
fine. Yeah, I respectfully, yeah.
No, I hear you. And I know we're talking about fiscal 27 budget planning, and this is an important component, I think, to that discussion, in that as we're looking forward, we don't want to be in the same situation as we are now.
Correct.
So whether that's putting it back on as a separate article or something else, then we'll need to approach that in fiscal 27. So my point being is, I think this, while we're a little off topic, I think it still relates to our fiscal 27 budget planning overall. Anything else on budget planning for fiscal 27? All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Why don't we move now to, there's no vote on this one, right? It was just
No.
a discussion.
Just lots of questions for Mary.
Select Board
Thank you, Mary.
vote to close the special town meeting warrant.
Do we know what we have on the warrant?
I'd like to know before we close it, what have we got on the warrant?
You have 8 or 9 articles. The first will be on MBTA zoning. The second will be accessory dwelling units. 2 citizens petitions. One is for, both contemplate the use of stabilization funds. The first is for rehiring, or filling, 2 police officer positions to the tune of just over $186,000. And the other citizens petition article is for fire salaries for 2 firefighters, again, using stabilization for just over $217,000. There's a couple of capital budget items in one article. One is for the harbor master for additional money for boat engines, and the water department, the use of water retained earnings for water main work or PFAS. Another article is for the reports, because we weren't able to vote on the March annual town meeting, on the reports because they weren't finished yet. Another is for the 4th of July appropriation, supplemental appropriations, one for exempt debt, and the other maybe for the ROC facility, and PEG access. The final article would be on the PEG access, a $25,000 expenditure using funds from there.
Can I just clarification, there's a supplemental appropriation for the 4th of July parade, is that
No.
in there?
Nope, you
What's
did
the
not.
4th of July?
4th of July article.
The 4th
What-
of July article.
What is it?
Funding for what we just talked about,
Okay.
if in fact
So there
people
is an
agree with it.
article, okay.
All right, any other questions?
So the two citizen petitions are for stabilization funds.
Using stabilization to hire 2 firefighters and 2 police officers.
And Mary, do we have a balance of the stabilization fund? Could I have that?
It is, as of June 30th, the last certified balance is $7,058,181, which represents 8.51% of our net operating budget.
And what
And-
is our policy?
Our policy is to, and this was included in the language, I just wanted to highlight for folks at
Yeah.
the previous town meeting, in our special town meeting warrant, in the explanation. What I'm going to share with you is, oh,
Sorry. This information was in the special town meeting warrant from the most recent March town meeting under the explanation. So the balance in the stabilization, for folks who couldn't hear me at home, was $7,058,181 as of June 30, 2024. That represents 8.5% of our net operating budget. The town's policy is to retain 5 to 10% of our net operating budget in the stabilization account itself. The Division of Local Services, DLS, as best practice, recommends 5 to 7%, but our policy is a little bit more aggressive at 5 to 10%. So we are meeting that policy target.
Yeah, 8%, right? Yeah.
Yep.
You told me a week or more ago that regarding I asked the question about the bond ratings and what they look at in order to get that AAA. Can you remind me what that
Yep, so-
percentage is?
The bond rating agencies look at overall reserves. So when you talk about reserves, there's more than just the stabilization account. Communities have a variety of other reserves as well. So the sum total of all reserves for bond rating agencies, they like to see, I should say, 5 to 15% of cumulative reserves. We're talking about stabilization, which is just one reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay,
All right,
excellent.
why don't we take a motion?
Yeah. And let me get the motion. I move that the Select Board close the June 16th, 2025 special town meeting warrant.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote, starting with Cindy.
Yeah.
Fernando, aye.
Mike Luck?
Ryan, aye.
Amy, aye.
Great, thank you all. I understand the Coastal Resiliency Task Force matter is not going forward, which is next on our agenda. So we will skip next to discussion pertaining to clarification for the beach escorting program. Steve Studley has been patiently waiting for this whole meeting. Steve, thank you very much for being here. As you're approaching the mic, I'll just remind everyone that this came up as a open forum issue last meeting, and given its importance and our interest in discussing the matter, we brought it back as an agenda item so we can talk about it tonight. So Steve, can you just remind us of the policy or the change, and then we can open it up for discussion.
Sure, yes. Steve Studley, Recreation Director. There's really no change. What I stated last week was there was some confusion from some people. I've received, since being here last week, a ton of phone calls of people saying they clearly understood that the reason the email was sent out was if this escorting becomes an option, they are now eligible. So in a nutshell, escorting, a lot of things have to line up, even if budgeting wasn't an issue, which we had put in our, if the override had passed, we were going to get an assistant beach ops manager, which would have assured that if escorting became available, we would have been able to do it. In order to escort, there's a variety of things that need to happen. Location of the avian species, the weather conditions, tides, conditions of the beach for OSVs, staffing of DBR, staffing of beach ops, not only rangers, but our supervisor, which we have one, needs to be there. There's strict state guidelines that he needs to make reports on, and only he can make that. An assistant would have also been able to, but a beach ranger doesn't have that authority with the state. It would then also, I'd have to look at where we were at with our staffing budget at the time escorting became available. I can say right now that if it became available prior to June 30th right now, we couldn't
we couldn't put it in, we don't have the money to do it anyway. There is potential. The reason we wanted people to have the option to watch the 15-minute video and then take the 5-question quiz, print out and sign their certificate, that if escorting happens, has to stand, they have to place on their dashboard, is that if something did happen and we were able to offer it if the opportunity came. If that was to even be a consideration, things we'd have to look at as the summer moved along would be reducing the hours we monitor the parking lot, the resident lot, the overflow lot, potentially reducing any nighttime crossover hours if those were available, as well as in the late summer, fall, and then spring of '26, reducing the hours that crossovers are open that we would monitor. So the email that went out that caused some questions was just as it stated. If things happen where everything fell in line, it would save people the time of rushing at the last minute to try to do it. So I know when I completed that, because it was open forum, there were no, I couldn't take questions, but I believe you guys may have had a question or two, which I'd be happy to try to answer.
Amy, I think you had some
No,
comments,
I think we're
questions?
good. I was trying to understand, what the difference was when it had been promised, again, the year before, and, what, again, I think we're all trying to do as much as we can to keep, the town open and people accessing the beach. So I was just trying to understand what the difference was.
Yeah, and when you said promised the year before, it just got put in the COI
Well,
a year
it
ago.
had been talked about, and then something glitched or something.
Yeah,
They
it was
couldn't
never,
do it last
yeah,
year.
it wasn't
and
put in the lease
trying
until,
to-
yeah.
Understand. Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, just a comment. We could talk about this for hours about the COI and everything like that, but this is a tool in the toolbox, and I think people should take the quiz and be ready. And if we're ready and the stars align, and we tried to do something last year, and it fell apart by 2 hours after because a bird moved. This is.
And that can easily happen again. And I know, Mike, you're aware, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But the limited openings are more apt to happen than this escorting, and in my opinion, are more valuable. And
Right.
they still require additional staffing, but those are a much more likely thing to happen than the escorting,
and more customer friendly
without a doubt.
because you're on the beach.
Correct.
There's no
You don't have to stay, you can come and go.
vans. There's no.
Correct.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
And we've had gradual improvements over the last.
Without a doubt.
Maybe
Yeah,
by
last
some
summer
luck,
was the
and-
best summer we've had in a really long time.
So there's been some, and crossover 3 has been, has worked out.
Absolutely.
It's open now. In fact, it's been 75 degrees, so you'd be crazy not to be out there these past weekends. So, anyhow, buy a beach sticker.
There you go. Any questions from the public? Steve, I just want to congratulate you and your team on the putting together the program itself. I found it to be very easy to follow. I understand it's very technical in terms of what you need to do to be compliant, and sort of depending on residents to follow that. You made it very easy in terms of the online process. The video is terrific. I will admit I had to take the test twice to pass.
Is that right?
I think there was a trick question in
It's a
there.
trick question.
Yes, had to do with speed limits. But in any event, everything was online. It worked out very easily. You were very clear with what you have to print out, and you said print out, sign, stick it in the glove compartment. It's all, if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's great. Just and to Mike's point, just do it, put it in the glove compartment. We'll hope for the stars to align, and maybe we'll get out there.
Yeah, and although I appreciate that, I'd have to say Mary's team needs a lot of
Yeah, I was gonna
thank
say
you as well.
Mary
The
and-
Treasury
Mary?
Department,
Okay.
Corey,
Yeah.
Corey and the staff did an amazing job and put in hours and hours. We work with them a lot, but they put in a ton of work in the Treasury Department. So they're the ones that really need to be thanked.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate, Brian, if I may,
Yeah.
I appreciate you raising that and recognizing them. The Treasury staff, the Treasurer Collector's Office has done yeoman's work to help facilitate that. I would also like to just take an opportunity, as we're encouraging folks to buy their beach stickers. When you come into Town Hall to purchase your beach sticker, please make sure you bring your registration, and please be patient with our staff as they work to fulfill the stickers. The process has changed this year, and we just ask everybody to be a little bit more patient as we are fulfilling those orders. But you can also do it online at home.
$190 for an overstand permit.
Bargain.
It's a half a grocery bill.
All right.
Do your math. Have a lot of fun this summer on $190.
All right, Steve, thanks, and thanks for sticking around.
You got it,
Appreciate
Steve.
it.
Take
Thanks
care.
for coming back. All right, great. We'll move on now to an update pertaining to the Employee Wellbeing Survey. I put this on the agenda, not for any particular discussion points, but we've all had, well, I think most of us, Mike, I don't know if you've had the opportunity yet, to speak with Rainey and Jeannie, just generally about, we talk about morale issues and what we can do as individual board members, and just in terms of getting our arms around it. Because of the open meeting law, of course, we don't have the opportunity to speak with one another outside of these meetings, at least in a quorum. So I put this on here so we could really ground ourselves and understand, without getting into gory detail, the general nature of the discussions we've had, to make sure we're all clear on where we're coming from and where we can go. So I'll just start it off by indicating that we've had opportunities, as I said, to meet, and we also included Labor Council in at least a couple of those meetings as it relates to surveys. Surveys, or a survey can be a tool. We've talked about that here, although I understand through consultation with council that it's not quite as simple as maybe we originally thought it could be. So with that said, I'll open it up to Rainey, if you want to add anything, or anybody on the board, if you want to contribute to the conversation so we can move
I can
forward.
update you on, Cindy and I met with Rainey and Jeannie, just our desire to do the anonymous survey. We really think that that would be a helpful tool. I think Rainey and Jeannie agree with that, and we're looking at strategies as to how we can best move forward with that effort without upsetting Labor Council or any of the unions, and to make it very clear to the employees that it's anonymous, it's a safe survey, and so we're going to meet again and regroup on that, but that's the goal. And so we're working together to that end.
There it is.
And I've set up every third Thursday of the month, I'll be at the senior center, and any town employee that would like to come and have a chat and talk about stuff, or just have a cup of coffee with me, I'm there and available. And I think, Jeannie, if you don't mind, there's Joanne Moore put together a nice little flyer. If you could send it out to all employees, and I'll be there every third Thursday at the senior center between the hours of 9 and 10, and happy to buy somebody a cup of coffee and a donut, and we can have a chat about life, chat about whatever you want to talk about. I'm there, and look forward to the opportunity to meet and spend a bit more time with town employees. All right, so that's my offer.
Thank you for doing that, Fernando. And just one important point I want to make is we're not at all looking to micromanage the employment here in town. We certainly want to be sensitive to overall engagement and employee well-being, and that's really at a high level. So we welcome these conversations, but I just want to make sure that we're level setting, and that this isn't a circumstance where we're looking to put anybody against anyone else. This is an opportunity for us to just get information and get to know folks throughout the town. Fernando, did you have?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Again, I just want to make it clear is that we as a select board, the way I look at it, we employ Rennie, and Rennie in turn employs all the rest of the town employees. So in a way, we're employers, right? And I think the more we get to know our employees on an individual basis. I go around at Christmas time and thank people for their service, but I think this is just another opportunity to, instead of having a short conversation, maybe just a longer conversation. So why you like working in Treasury? Tell me all about your job in Treasury or whatever, or DPW, or the transfer station. What is the most fun you have at the transfer station? I'm sure they've got a lot of stories that they could share, but anyway, that's the objective, just to get to know me a little bit better, and for town employees for me to get to know town employees. So that's my objective, simple as that.
Sure. Any other comments, questions? Cindy, anything?
No, I don't think so. I think Amy covered it pretty well. Again, just another tool at this time when, things are a little bit unsettled. And we've had a very unsettling spring, late winter and spring. And just another opportunity for people to be able to verbalize in some way without concern of being identified, because I think some people would like to talk one-on-one, and some people would like to do it anonymously. And so it's just another tool to help us and to help HR, because again, not going above and beyond HR by any means, but just to help get a handle on employee satisfaction and in a general sense and in a specific sense as well.
Want to demonstrate that we appreciate what our employees do every day.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you all. If we have nothing else, let's move on to the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very
Wait,
brief.
hold on just a sec. Okay. Did I skip over something? Committee appointments I have is right after the town manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, I appreciate it. Go right ahead, Rainey.
Thank you. Just one quick update and regarding Duxbury Beach. Nesting has picked up quickly over the last week. I've heard this is from the DBR themselves. Currently, there are 24 piping plover nests on the beach. The first nests have started to incubate, and we lost 2 nests so far. DBR field staff estimates that there are 35 pair, which is comparable to the pair count at this time last season. Last season, by May 2nd, there were 16 nests, indicating the pairs have nested a little earlier this year. As a reminder, the symbolic fencing has been installed along the entire stretch of the oceanside beach, the Upper Dune. Areas behind the symbolic fencing represent closed areas without public access. The closed area also extends to the backside of the dune up to Gurnett Road, where the post and cable fencing is located. Please note that the symbolic fencing may be bumped out, meaning it is moved east of the beach in small sections based on nesting activity in various areas. Moving the fencing in this way helps protect the nesting pairs while maximizing access for pedestrians and OSV use in other areas. Reminder, as per town ordinance, dog regulations are in effect from April 1st to September 15th. And that's my report.
Okay. Thank you. Anything from the board? Why don't we move on to committee appointments, reappointments, and resignations, please?
I move that the Duxbury Selectboard appoint Andrea Hamill to the Municipal Commission on Disabilities for a term ending 6/30/2028, and also to appoint Deborah McCauley to fill an unexpired term on the same Municipal Commission on Disabilities for a term ending 6/30/2026.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No, I just want to say that because this is a commission and we're following our protocol, I did attend the meeting. Jeannie was there as well. This was a unanimous recommendation by the Municipal Commission on Disabilities to appoint these wonderful candidates, and I think they'll do a great job.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Mike. All those in favor? This is a roll call. We'll start with Cindy.
Fernando, aye.
Michael, aye.
Brian, aye.
Amy, aye.
Okay,
Great.
the following boards and/or committees have the available seats. There are one seat available on the Conservation Commission, Design Review Board, Duxbury Cultural Council, and on the Nuclear Advisory Committee. The Conservation Commission, this is advance notice, an open seat on Concom due resignation, which will be available starting July 1st, 2025. There is on the Nuclear Economic Advisory Committee, there are 2 seats available, and on the Taxation Aid Committee, there are 3 seats available. If anyone is interested in volunteering on a board or committee, you're encouraged to fill out the Talent Bank form, which can be found on the town's website under the Forms and Documents tab. That's good enough.
Thank you, Fernando.
Fill in the rest.
Let's
Use
move on
Google.
to our, that's right, our one-day liquor license application, please.
Yeah, I move that Ms. Audrey Kaur, as a representative of the South Shore Conservatory, is granted a one-day wine and malt license for the Duxbury Music Festival to be held at the South Shore Conservatory, Ellison Center for the Arts, 64 St. George Street on Sunday, June 22nd, 2025, and Thursday, June 26th, 2025, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for each event and contingent upon the conditions of the license.
May I have a
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go with the vote. Cindy? Fernando?
Aye.
Aye.
Brian, aye.
Amy, aye.
All right,
Michael, aye.
excellent. We have announcements.
Yes, please do join the MBTA Communities Working Group at the Duxbury Free Library in the Mary Room for a public forum on the following dates: May 28th, 6 to 8 p.m., June 4th, 1 to 3 p.m. There's a reminder of the annual mandatory outside watering restrictions. I've received a few comments about this one, but yes, in order to maintain our water supply for domestic use and fire protection, the following outside watering restrictions are effective April 23rd, 2025. Odd number houses will be restricted to Thursday. Even number houses will be restricted to Wednesday. All outdoor watering to be done between the hours before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m. No watering on Sunday. Mandatory rain sensors are required to be installed for automatic irrigation systems. The use of handheld hose is allowed any day of the week when mandatory restrictions are in place. The hose must be equipped with an automatic shut-off style device, which would stop the water from flowing if the person were to walk away or drop the hose. For more information, please do go to www.mass.gov/info-details/drought status. The next select board meeting will be on Monday, May 19th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m.
So no meeting next week. We'll skip and then, all right, so great. In that case, let's wish every mom a happy Mother's Day.
Happy
Yes,
Mother's Day.
happy Mother's
Coming
Day.
up as well. All right, if there's nothing further, I will take one more motion.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn, perhaps. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any
I thought that's what you
discussion?
said.
Almost.
Almost.
It was close, I was anticipating.
All right, Cindy?
Aye.
Fernando, aye.
Michael, aye.
Brian, aye.
Amy, aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
All right, good.